Just listening in for the time being.
Hell yeah, that's what's up. What up, Experience?
Yo, what's up, everybody? Jason, what up, man? So I know this is all gas, no brakes. I don't know if anybody clicked on that Danny Jones interview with this dude, Jason Bunny, but I know he's a controversial dude. I don't really know the history on him, so I ended up clicking play on it, and I just know he was like some kind of alt right kind of dude that was aligned with Richard Spencer and a lot of politics shit, which I always thought was weird because, from what I understood, he had like a Persian background. And when I think alt right, I always think like racist, kind of like crazy shit, right? So anyway, I didn't know where this was going, but I saw UFO in the headline, so I clicked on it, and I'm listening to him, and he touches on a bunch of different shit. Um, and this could be all disinformation, so I'm taking that into account. But he opens up telling this story about him getting contacted by some British guy who said he was a member of the British chapter of the Vril Society, which I thought was interesting because Vril and all that stuff is tied into the Nazis and all kinds of crazy shit. And he said he had gotten some papers that showed the blueprint of the bell-shaped UFO and how it worked and what they were doing and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, he goes deep into a lot of different stuff. He touches on a couple of different things of religion and the NHI, and he touches on the Sumerians and how he thinks Atlantis is probably somewhere in Antarctica, some kind of shit down there. But what I thought was interesting that he said, and I thought about this too, about reverse engineering, is that he talked to some guy that was in Lockheed. And he said that these test pilots, or pilots they're bringing in to test these reverse engineered craft, um, they were having problems. And this is why we haven't really moved forward in a lot of the testing, is because essentially they're piloting time machines. So when they get in and they start flying these craft, they become disoriented because of how the craft is manipulating time and space. So they hit a threshold where they can't even operate anymore because of the disorientation that's happening. So I thought it was interesting. I don't know about this dude. I haven't really done a deep dive or any research on him, but this it's a pretty long interview with this Danny Jones thing, and he touches on a couple different things that kind of clicked for me, that resonated. But like I said, who knows? I don't know if anybody else has listened to it or not yet. Well,
No, I
already.
haven't. But I think that's one of the first people I remember hearing Doomer Daddy talk about in a space. And him and UAP Mike got in a little tizzy over it. So that's about all I remember.
Yeah, the politics shit, I don't really care for. You know, when I hear alt right and that kind of shit, I'm like, what is this dude's angle? And he was talking about regime change in Iran, like he was saying a
Yes,
bunch of
I
wild,
listened.
crazy shit.
Experience. I listened to half of it today. So I just got through. I know I listened to the first hour. So I just got. I'm hoping he's done talking about the Iran stuff and he gets back to the UFO stuff. I was like, whoop, what a veering. But yeah, what did you think about the Glock? That's what the bell.
Yeah, the Glock and the bell-shaped UFO. I don't know. It's plausible. I know that it was always a thing, and it's been kind of like a myth or whatever. If they really were working on it, I feel like they were. I think there's even pictures out there of that shit of like Nazi emblems on a bell-shaped looking craft or something. But he said that the way it was, like, I guess moving around with some kind of mercury infusion engine or something. I don't know. He broke it down somehow, but yeah, I thought it was interesting. I was like, yeah, it's probably some shit they were working on. Who knows?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the rest of it. I do think it's quite interesting how he learned these things and they came and they're coming after him, which is what I felt like. I know he goes in and talks about like a lot of the political stuff, but I just felt like he was really touching base on the fact that like this guy was MI6 and he was, coming in and like he was part of some kind of like operate. It's very unique story, one I've not heard.
Yeah, he was trying to allude to the fact that this guy was maybe trying to get him into a position where he was buying all this crazy UFO stuff to be another voice in the community and kind of push this narrative. This guy was supposedly, like he said, was a part of the Vril Society, right? And then he was also like a 33rd third degree Mason. He was a Rosicrucian. Like he was tied into all these different secret societies when he looked into this dude, which I thought was also interesting. But MI6, when I think intelligence and counterintelligence, I'm like, oh, they're feeding him bullshit. You know what I'm saying? To see if he bites. So I don't know. There's a lot of that.
There is a lot of that. I think, VC, did you have any questions for Jason? Because I think that might be interesting. You did earlier.
Well, first of all, I just wanted the other person that was talking to me about arts parts in here, then finally gave me the keywords to look up. Thank you. Saved me a little time there. I went and looked at the arts part thing. Okay. And this is like a tiny, tiny fraction. I mean, if you take your little fingernail and divide it into maybe 20 sections, it might be a 20th or a 10th of your fingernail. I mean, they put the sample on a penny, and it looks like about 1/50th of the penny is the sample. The arts part thing I'm talking about is something she held in the palm of her hand when she took it out of her safe. A little teeny tiny tiny fraction thing like that to me is pretty meaningless. I was talking to the big sample that's in the palm of your hand, and that Ventura person or whoever is also connected to media and uh, like influencers. I mean, they even use the word, so it's sort of like a media presence. It's a multi millionaire, but all I'm trying to say is that doesn't impress me. A little thing like that. Yeah, I mean, let's see what they do with it. But they had no results. They're just showing pictures of it, of the little sample. So, like I say, as I said from the very beginning when I just brought up the artifact, and especially the UFO Mike, who tends to interrupt and not let you. The
Well,
point
I'm
was.
sorry. I need to interject there. You've done that quite a bit. Can
Well,
you mute your mic while I'm talking, please? I've got an echo. You've done that quite a bit since you've been here too. So I mean, yeah.
yeah, my point with mentioning him though is just that again, I brought up the artifact thing, and he couldn't present any evidence, though he says it's all over the place. And then when I was trying to bring up the point of the fiberglass and how you have people that are supposedly experts in it, and then Jacques Vallée, again, discrediting. And the reason why I'm repeating it, because then I get interrupted by somebody else in here who says, oh, go check this other, you talk about art parts. There's going to be some release, like some science thing. So I go, and okay, they've got it under a high magnification camera, and you can see the little tiny sample, but there's nothing reported on the meaning of it. And I'm just also pointing out that the sample with the art parts thing fit in the entire palm, or pretty much most of the palm of Linda Moulton's Howe's hand when she had this thing. So again, it's the same thing. It's always the same situation. The stuff just evaporates. There's never really anything come of it. Okay, so now we got like a little tiny, teeny tiny fragment that doesn't match the arts parts that Linda Moulton Howe had, and so it doesn't mean much to me. I'm just, people send me off on down the rabbit hole. I check it out, and I'm just reporting back. I don't know what the other question was for this person speaking right now. There was a woman that was asking me about it. I don't. What was that referring to?
You had a couple of questions, VC, and Jason's here. Like, I think that's awesome. You have some sort of magical thing. So if you wanted to ask, I'm sure we'd love to hear.
I have two questions for Jason. 2 weeks ago, Jason, I saw this grid pattern.
Real quick. Do you guys ever think about how Jason Sands is a human like the rest of us, and maybe he just wants to like come into a space and chillax and not be asked 20 questions times 20? Just saying. I don't know. That's why he came up here, but just throwing that idea out there.
Yeah, he did say he was just up here listening.
Yeah.
VC,
Okay.
can you mute your mic while I'm talking, please? Thank you. Yeah, he did. He was welcome into the space. I'm happy to have you here. It's nice to meet you, Jason. You said you just wanted to come up here and listen. So I mean, if he wants to speak, we'll just leave that totally up to him.
I apologize. I was,
Yeah,
I
I
was
can
late.
answer
VC, please mute your mic when people are talking. My apologies, Jason. Go ahead.
It's okay. Yeah, I can answer a few questions.
Okay, we're gonna go with hands. We're gonna go with hands. VC, if you keep doing that, you're gonna be dropped down to listener. I'm sorry, but okay. We'll go with hands for Jason.
Go ahead, Randy, because I interrupted you. Go ahead.
Jason, a couple of weeks ago, I saw a grid pattern in the sky. It seemed like it was about 5,000 feet up. I live in Ohio near Patterson Air Force Base, and I had heard planes in the sky the night before. Is this something that the military does? Is this in my eyes, or am I crazy, Jason? Um, Science Bob had taken pictures one state over from me and saw a grid pattern kind of going into a wormhole pattern, and had shared with us in a space the week before. I appreciate your time, and I apologize. I jumping into asking you a question. And I apologize so much, and I appreciate your time, sir.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not familiar with any kind of grid patterns. I know that there's been some talk like the military or somebody has a machine that can alter the weather patterns, and I know the weather itself can be kind of deceiving with some of its shapes and sizes, and sometimes it does look very, um, I don't know, I guess uniform at times, just like the ocean can have like waves that end up being a grid pattern also. So the medium of air is very similar to water, but I'm not an expert. I'd need to kind of look at the pictures, and then I'd have to talk to some of my friends who are weather geniuses and be able to look at it and give me a better feel for that, because I'm not the expert.
Thank you, sir.
All right, let's go to experience, and then we'll go to VC Smart.
I didn't have my hand up, but you can go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry,
VC.
it's a glitch. Okay, let's go to VC Smart.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't understand before who they were referring to was Jason. Okay, so that didn't put together till I put it together. So I see why they were asking me about that, because that subject was brought up earlier with you, and you're somebody that the conversation came up with you as being somebody that is connected with Major Grolsch, maybe, in that he says you're one of the whistleblowers that came forward with certain knowledge, and that also you acknowledge that Major Grolsch, that you're one of the people that was sort of in the background that he was protecting, or says somebody knows something and you're one of the people that have personal experience. Because that's one of the things in the UFO community that's a huge complaint. We always have people that'll come forward and say that I know of somebody who tells me somebody, it's the old telephone conversation, and you're not really hearing firsthand from the person that says they saw something or know something. And you're somebody that would have been in the field of intelligence. I've only listened to a short time with your one interview, I think at UFO Info or something, and I didn't finish it. I know it's like a 6+ hour conversation or something, and it sounded Well, like I did not listen to it closely. I'm just going to admit, and not because I was dismissing it, just I was late at night and probably fell asleep while I was starting to listen to it. But it sounds like you were somebody in the intelligence field, and if I remember vaguely, your main assignments or one of your major things that you got um, uh, expertise in or experience in was you were listening into different maybe SAP programs, people that would get on the phone in communications between each other, and then you would, I guess, making sure that the conversations are secure and there's nothing, some kind of a mess up with leaks of information or confidentiality checks, that kind of thing. And then one of the things was maybe you overheard some things that were leading you to believe that there could be certain technologies that the U.S. has acquired, maybe through ETs. I mean, that's just an inference. I don't know that I don't even remember that you were implying or saying that. But one of the things that crossed my mind on things like that is when people are dealing even with these top secret compartmentalized projects, could they use code words, or project names? Because this is something the military is famous for, to kind of give them a cover, to make people misled about what the topic really might be talking about. So they could be saying on the ET project or this UFO or something like that, and that just being a
Did
cover
you have a
for
question?
intelligence.
Did you have a question for Mr. Sands? Because you're going on and on. Mute your mic, please. Oh my God. Yeah, like, I mean, he's in here to answer questions. You've been talking for like, almost 10 minutes. Can you please get to your question for Mr. Sands, please?
Well, just that, is that possible that these things that you listen into are covered up with misleading, cover topics? I think he knows exactly what I'm talking about. And could you just explain what, I assume you had something like Q clearances or something at that level? What projects or bases and things were you monitoring with those type of uh, checks, intelligence checks?
Okay, yeah, I can answer that. That was, I think, 6 different things. Um, so yes, I do talk to David Grush quite a bit. I haven't talked to him for over 2 weeks now, I believe, but he was with me from the start when I was on the UAP Task Force Forum. Uh, I, just to clarify, I was not employed by them. I was just on the forum that they provide. So yeah, that's where we met. I gave some input uh, because, as you were asking a little bit later, for my Q clearance. But yeah, I did overhear stuff about technologies and things like that when we were monitoring the phones at various bases here in the continental U.S. And yes, I am one of the whistleblowers. Matter of fact, in 2022, when they started pulling me in, I actually came in and testified about 2 weeks before David Grush did. He was actually going through his ICIG process, so he had to come in a little bit later due to some legal uh, things that he had to go do because I was different. I was not uh, pursuing a formal legal ICIG complaint or anything like that, but he was. So I ended up going in and testifying before he did in 2022, or when they were signing the NDAA. Um, so that's where we met. So yes, I'm part of the 40 to 80 whistleblowers. I don't know how many he actually has interviewed. Um, we do talk quite a bit, like I said. So yeah, that's me. Yes, I am one of those people. Um, so getting to the monitoring and confidentiality question you had, yes, that's what I did. It was called a formal term was called multidiscipline vulnerability assessing back then, and that's when people like myself and the 3 other intelligence analysts would go out for 2-week missions to various bases around the continental U.S., like Eglin, White Sands, Wright Patterson, all those kind of different places. Anyway, and yeah, we'd plug into the telephones and we'd listen to the directors, the leaders, the scientists, the engineers, and all those kinds of things. And yeah, there's a fine line there when it comes to what's classified and confidential. Well, number one, we were always protecting people's names and private lives. That's something that in my career field you get trained in, just like NSA is. That you protect American citizens, and the only thing that would break that bond would be say we had overheard somebody committing a crime or was threatening somebody's life or something as serious as that, or our national security was seriously threatened. So those were the only exceptions. But then I would usually stop monitoring that phone line and hand it over to somebody like the OSI or the FBI for them to take over, because it then became a criminal investigation, and that was not my lane in the road. So that's how we would go out and do that sort of stuff. But yeah, so you also mentioned in line with some of the monitoring, overhearing technological advances and things like this. Yeah, we heard that all the time. There was a distinct difference, though, when you're talking about the NHI tech, or exotic tech is what I consider it, because it was, sometimes it was just us working on things and making breakthroughs, and it was exotic in that frame of mind. But there were other times when we were hearing things from a laboratory, and they literally told each other that the humans that's us, are not allowed in when the tall whites and the grays are in the room or in the control room and things like this. So there was a distinct non-code word reference that we're talking about species of people, being, humans on one side are not allowed in the lab until the NHI or the tall whites and the grays were exiting and done with their part of the test in the lab. And it was highly managed as well, because the NHI did not want to give us a weapons system, but they helped us in other ways where they kind of helped to set up the lab environment so that we could get a clean test. Like, if we're doing stealth technologies and stuff like that, they would, try to help us to make sure we got a nice clean signal and data, those kinds of things. But it was highly managed by the tall whites and the grays, because they just run that way. So it's not a free for all technology exchange on that part. But yeah, there's other stuff that we're all working on as well, with different high tech stuff and other things that are weapon systems that are classified that I would not discuss, those kinds of technologies. So that kind of answers everything. And then the Q clearance, that's the only other thing I didn't address so far. And that is, yeah, I had a Q clearance. That's something that's still in the systems that anybody can look up. So I think that kind of covers everything you're curious about.
Thank you, Jason.
It's amazing, Jason, how just a few words from you can clear up a whole bunch of things that people talk about for weeks at a time. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much. That's amazing. I can't even wrap my head around what you've experienced. I just thank you so much for your service. Thank you.
Yeah, no
Would they
problem.
have to sanitize the room before you guys would go in, or before they would go in after, say, humans were in there? Would you have to sanitize it before the aliens would then go in? Or NHI, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the security personnel would have to go through and check to make sure that everything was cleaned up. Uh, I believe the tall whites and the grays would also, you know, clean up the rooms after they were done, because there are some things that they didn't want us to go in there and kind of like scrape off some of the coatings and things like this that may have had some like nano bits in it that they didn't want us to go in there and reverse engineer.
What about
Heck yeah.
viruses?
Can you repeat that?
Like viruses between humans and NHI? Like, could we infect them?
Oh, I'm sure that does happen, but I think the having 70 to 80 years of being in the program and having agreements with these other beings, I think we've probably nailed that down. And I think that would be a mutual benefit for both the NHI and the humans to be concerned about. So they both probably inoculated themselves of all that and learned how to make sure that there wasn't any cross-pollination of diseases and things like this. I never heard of it being a problem, in other words.
Tiff, go
Cool.
ahead.
Yeah, what's up, Tiff?
Hey Jason, it's Tiff, as you can tell. But I was wondering what they're doing to get these crafts in order to shoot them down, and also what kind of things that they're using to reverse engineer or weaponry that they're reverse engineering. If you can say any of that.
You kind of, I couldn't quite catch your first part of your question. You mentioned that some kind of craft, and then.
Oh, I was just wondering how they get the crafts to shoot them down.
Oh, well, actually, just recently, we've had a discussion with some friends of mine that we're in a group with, and there is some research that states that the kinds of electromagnetic power plants that might be on board some of these um, craft are affected by microwave, uh, high frequency microwaves and stuff like this, because they're so tightly wound with these atomic level sort of matrices that looks like, atom by atom, that the craft has been, put together, like Gary Nolan mentions in his analysis of the metal he examined, that it looked like they were, it was literally placed one molecule by another molecule in a matrix type pattern. And apparently microwaves can disrupt that and cause, polarization problems at the atomic level. And some of the postulation is that perhaps that's what's, causing some of the crashes, and that it maybe messes with their onboard, systems and things like this. And I believe there's some folks that mentioned, who are also people that were around during Roswell. That was before I was born, but they also claimed that it was a radar system that, hit these craft and it actually downed them, and they have since the NHI have figured out a way not to or to insulate their ships and craft so that it's not interfering with them anymore. But that's just as much as I know about it. But it's just because of microwaves and high frequencies that seem to interfere with their craft.
Very interesting. So the equipment, the radar equipment that might be affecting the weather in the States, it seems to be coming from around a lot of military bases. So I wonder if that's but you don't have to answer that part. And just the other part was what are they using to reverse engineer these crafts? Like what kind of weapons do you think that they are acquiring?
Well, I know that lasers are something that people are seeing when we point lasers at some of the craft that we've already seen video on, and there's mass sightings where people are pointing lasers at these craft and then they shine back. So there's a response, and it seems to be from an intelligent source that is responding to us, kind of bouncing our laser light off of their craft. So I would imagine lasers is one of their weapon systems that the NHI have. I know that nukes is something they tend not to like. I know that they've stated to eyewitnesses and people that were abducted that they left a message to mankind, sort of a thing, that these witnesses are saying that the NHI are very concerned about nukes and that there's a very disruptive force that takes place during a nuclear detonation that, quite frankly, is reverberates around quite a distance in the universe, and they're very concerned that we don't, do stuff like that. Plus, there's a um, it's probably a desire for us not to ruin our planet, because there's a lot of biodiversity here compared to even our own planets in our solar system. That we have a lot of things here that are probably considered very precious, and not common in everywhere in all the other possible places of life in our universe. But other than that, the other weapon systems are something I can't talk about.
Thank you so much, Jason. You're always so cool with your time.
You're welcome.
You know, you can tell people to shove their questions where the sun doesn't shine whenever you want. Okay.
I'll take 2 more.
Cool. We'll go with Rich because we haven't heard from him yet. What's up?
Well, thank you. Yeah, a couple questions for you, Jason, if you don't mind. And thank you for your service and everything that you've done for ufology and disclosure. But I guess I got a few questions. What's your understanding of time? And can you describe it from, I guess, your own day-to-day work back in the day when you were doing what you were doing? And do you know if they're trying to fly these craft with our consciousness, like humanity's consciousness? And are you aware of any other different messages from alien races for humanity? And the last question is, why does our soul seem to be so valuable to them? And thank you.
Wow, those very deep questions. My understanding of time, it's something, I'll say it's my opinion, just kind of the way I think about it. Um, After being exposed to the things I was, time is malleable. It is not constant, unless you're looking at it from, like, say, you're in a place that to us looks like a slowed down time. However, in that part of the universe where time is slowed down by, say, a black hole or sped up, then you could literally feel like only a minute went by, just like we've seen in some of the movies. But outside of that time zone of that area where the time is being pulled in a different direction, then yeah, it's quite possible that there's like hours, days, years that go by, depending on how close to the event horizons of a black hole, and that's scientifically plausible. So I would say that my understanding of time is that it's quite possible that if it's manipulatable, um, that there are types of energies today that we're starting to test that actually can prove one way or the other that it can be generated by us, but it takes a lot of power to do so. And that seems to be something that the craft that we're seeing might have, because they display really amazing amounts of power and propulsion that we can't do, or we can't accomplish right now with our current tech. Maybe some of the people in the program have been working on that, but I would suppose that some of that would actually, say you've got an electromagnetic generation power plant inside one of these craft, it may actually double as some of the ways that they are able to transcend dimensions, time, and space, and all these other pieces of our universe and physicality. So, yeah, that's quite possible. Um, can we test fly them? I'm sure that if, yeah, the retrieval program has already been, you know, spoken of by other whistleblowers. I know David addressed that as well, that yes, there is a retrieval program. I know I was invited to be part of it. So I know that there are craft in our inventory that we've grabbed. However, the NHI probably don't want us to have them, and that's something I'm concerned with also, because uh, that's something that they would want back very badly. But anyway, I would suppose that anything in our inventory that we do have, we have probably attempted to pilot it ourselves. And I've heard that some people might interface with it mentally, um, or physically, or maybe it's a combination of both. I think it's probably a combination of both, in my experience. Um, Now, I'll speak more of that after James Fox's film comes out. There's a part of the encounter I had in the desert that kind of addresses some of that. Um, our soul. Yeah, I think our soul is something that is very unique uh, to the way that we live, and it's eternal. I've also heard that Lazar said that he said that the NHI referred to us as containers of other souls as well. So, to me, I know that I feel like me. I don't feel like I've got an alien soul inside of me or anything. I feel like I'm myself. Um, but yeah, who knows? Maybe that's a way for them to escape what they're going through. Maybe they're going through some kind of a survival problem where maybe they've done some of their DNA in their society, and now that they can't reproduce, so maybe they find our bodies, one way or another, to be a place where they can continue their species, at least on the soul level. And that would also give them the ability to live on our planet as well as other planets if they choose to use the same DNA technology there. So soul is very precious. I think that if the NHI are looking to continue their own souls by using some of our bodies, the demons and everything else, that's another part of that I'm not quite comfortable talking about publicly right now, because you're dealing with belief systems as well that kind of raises a lot of people's hackles. But for me, I do believe that there is a nefarious side to that as well that you have to be careful of, because you shouldn't allow yourself to be open to other influences and things like this. But yeah, I've heard that people, actually in regressive hypnosis have given experiences that they were not born on this planet even. Some of them ancient Egyptian histories or things that they remember of living in Egypt in ancient times and stuff like this. So there's a lot of that that's still I'm pondering. I've not settled on any given thing. All I know is that I do have a soul, or I believe I do, and that I need to preserve it as best I can. And I think that covers everything you're talking about.
Thank you.
Do you think they're like quantum entangled with the ships, maybe?
Yeah, I would say that quantum, I think, to me, is kind of a very weak term for saying that there's a force in this universe, or at least a state of matter in this universe that's quantum, that doesn't fully describe what that really means, because you're talking about the ability of something to exist or not exist. And to me, that's creationism. And that takes consciousness, because you can't make nothing from nothing. That means there has to be some sort of movement into existence to make a causal effect into a three-dimensional matter or some other sorts of things. So there's a lot more to quantum than we're currently able to describe scientifically.
Hey, Jason, quick question for you. A lot of people talk about the moon. There's people like Sergeant Carl Wolf, who was going to give sworn testimony that our lunar programs documented buildings on the backside of the moon. And there's been, some rumor that this has been part of that cover-up. Have you heard anything or any indication or any experience with mentions of the moon?
Yes, I have. There seems to have been a maybe secretive program that they were running during the Apollo missions where things were seen, and you've even heard from astronauts that have given testimony that that's exactly what they experienced, not just visual things, but audible things that they can't explain. And those are all I find very credible, especially from astronauts, because they really are people that have high integrity, and I'm very respectful of what they say. And I honestly did hear some things about lunar this or lunar that. So there's something going on the moon that maybe has been kind of on the down low. Not sure if they're still currently working on it. Maybe it was just something they tried earlier on. I think if there was a presence on the moon with the NHI, I think they would have kicked us off. Honestly, they don't particularly like the fact that we're reaching out to the stars and the planets. I think they don't think we're ready for that, and I think they kind of view us as unprepared. So I think maybe that's why there's not a lot of activity with the lunar and moon kind of things that are going on, and I think that's something that just I believe, and that's my opinion for now. But yeah, I did hear pieces of things that were taking place or took place during the Apollo missions.
Okay, Jason. Oh, sorry. I don't know how many more questions you'd like to answer, Jason, but If anyone has any questions, please put your hands up. Thank
Uh,
you. Go ahead, Mike.
we have, yeah, whatever Mike wants to say, and then we'll go with Justin, Sarah.
No, let the ladies go.
Okay. Jason, first of all, I hope that you're at a point where you feel comfortable just hanging with us. I know we ask a lot of questions. It's like another world for us. And of course, we have a lot of questions about that world. I'm curious, you talk about how the NHI work with us, but yet we shoot their craft down. I don't quite get it. Is it just there are certain NHI we work with and we kind of have agreements with, or and then there's others that visit who aren't allowed on Earth, and the other NHI don't want them here? Is that how it works, or?
Yeah, that's precisely how it works. I know I've only heard of the tall whites and the grays in the program. Um, Outside the program, I've had other experiences from what I think are from other species. So the tall whites and the grays are not the only kids on the block, so to speak. Um, and I think that those other beings that are not tall whites and grays don't participate in the program because they don't condone it. Um, and they probably are monitoring all of that, and they probably have a say in exactly what the tall whites and the grays are allowed to do. And I think there's probably they're running things like us. If you can imagine, that if any one person says that there's life out there, they've got to have their own form of government, their own civilization, their own culture, their own set of laws to rule themselves by. And if they've been around a lot longer than we have, and achieved a planetary government, let's say, it might be more civilized looking than we have. And I think that's the way it is for the most part for them. And then there's the other types that are spoken of that are like the reptilians and things like this that people have really bad experiences with. And they seem to be very reprobate, very violent, and even some of them seem to view us as a food source. Things like this are, and so there's the whole gambit out there. I feel like if there's life even in one place, I think that means that the pattern for life is actually more prevalent than this emptiness of space. Um, and I think that's more the case. And even so, the universe is so vast that there could be literally trillions of other beings out there. That being the case, here on our planet, um, I would say that there's a lot of different agendas taking place, a lot of different viewpoints. But overall, we're not dead. We might have been abused at one point, just like it says with the Anunnaki in ancient histories and things like this. But current day, we're still alive. Yeah, we are being abducted, I guess, um, and that may be partly the fault of the program people agreeing to things just for very mediocre technology exchanges and things like this. So I'm not totally condoning or not condemning either, because I wasn't exposed to the full brunt of what exactly is going on in the program. I just know I have my concerns that the NHI presence here needs to be something that's I know that is unclassified, and that can be at least shared. I know that the national security pieces of it, like the weapon systems that they're working on to defend our nation, those need to stay classified. Um, and that's just my feeling for it. But yeah, I would say that there are some that work with us, and I would say that the ones that work with us probably have a desire to be here in a way where maybe they see some resources here that are valuable to them, or for some reason they do find value in having an agenda with us that maybe perhaps they can't do elsewhere. And that's kind of a mystery to me as to what exactly caused them to enter into this. I don't think they would have succumbed to coercion if we had just captured one of their craft. I think it would have pissed them off, but I don't think that would have caused their race to, start doing technology exchanges unless there was some other sort of way that they got introduced to the program. So it's a bit of a mystery to me. I don't know all the ins and outs of that.
Do you know anything about the whistleblowers, the 40 whistleblowers? Did any of them work with NHI, since you can talk about that?
I believe so. David Grush would be more of the expert on all the other whistleblowers and what was said. I think he gave a pretty good rendition, generalized, but it was a good rendition of some of the things he's heard from the other whistleblowers. And yeah, he's kind of described a lot of the same things that I just described. Is that, yeah, there is a presence. They do seem to be working with the programmer. Some of them are, and yeah, some of the other whistleblowers were probably the source of some of that. Um, and I do want to caveat that my presence in the program was only during the mid 1990s. So mine is more archival. I don't know what's happened since the 1990s until now inside the program. So some of the other whistleblowers may have more up to date information on that, but that may be something we'll see later in the year if there's more testimonies and some of them are brave enough to come forward.
Okay,
All right, let's go to Sarah, experience, then Zim.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. I have a quick question regarding if you think we will be seeing any congressional hearings this summer, and might you be a part of them? I don't know if you can speak on that, but I'm just curious. Thank you.
I do know that we do have some congressmen that are very uh, on board with wanting to try to get to another set of testimonies from firsthand witnesses, and I would love to see that happen. Yes, my name has popped up in those conversations. I don't know whether I will or will not. Depends on what they want to talk about, and uh, those are the kinds of things. All I know is that I believe if we do more testimony, we need to take it a step further than David Grush and the rest of them did. If we do just exactly the same thing, I don't think it's pushing things further down the road. We need to have some real discussion. Um, we really need to have a deeper investigation than I think we've seen. And I think those are some of the topics that if I were on, Capitol Hill giving testimony, I would address. So I may not be talking a lot about little green men. I'd be more talking about let's get through this process here because I've seen what happened from last year, and I'm kind of not happy with the fact that I've yet to see or hear how deeply the investigation took place, and I'd like to see a little bit more openness about what Arrow states as being that they went through and looked at archival data and exactly what they found, because it seems to be a point of contention. There's a lot of journalists and people that have been researching the UAP phenomenon for decades that they seem to think that Arrow missed a lot of things. So I think those are some of the items I would bring up if I were there to address those.
What up, Jason? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, cool. I'm by Dulles, so I got a bad signal here sometimes. Looking forward to the documentary, and I have a lot of questions that I'll probably have after that. But just to touch on what you just mentioned in the space, you said the grays and the tall whites, and I'm hoping you can provide some clarity here because it's something that I've been trying to pick on as well. You may not know the answer, but I ask you that when you say tall whites, different um, classifications that I'm hearing when I hear tall whites. Tall whites, I've heard or I've read or seen accounts saying that they're actually taller looking bees, but just whiter skin. And then there's the tall whites that are the actual human looking Nordic ones. Do you know this distinction between the two, or can you clarify that?
Yeah, I think Mr. Hall did describe them more carefully than I did. Yes, they are very human looking. They are taller than us. I think the way he described it is that they live to about 700 or 800 years old. When they get older, they do tend to grow very tall, and that's the cause of their death is because just like people here that have that problem with they have like a gene that causes them to grow too tall. Eventually, their heart just can't handle pumping the blood around their larger bodies. The same thing seems to happen with these tall whites. Uh, so they go through this life cycle when they're up to about 70 years of age, 100 years of age. They're about of average height, is what Mr. Hall describes, and that seems to be consistent with the perhaps tall white or hybrid that I bumped into in the desert. So yeah, I would say that I probably met one of the probably younger of their species face to face. Now, Mr. Hall seems to have had a lot more contact than I ever had, and I would say that yeah, that's probably um, more his expertise than mine. But I do agree that after viewing his his video. Mr. Hall, I would recommend anybody here interested in tall whites and grays, or at least tall whites, that Mr. Hall has I really find his story credible because he has mentioned also some of the procedures there on the base that I also experienced, and he describes them to a T. So that's the way I feel about it.
Is that Mr. Hall? Is there a YouTube video with his account, or what's his first and last?
Yeah,
Because I'm not familiar.
I can't remember the exact title, but there is Mr. Hall's. What do they call it? He's written a couple of books too, but yeah, it's on YouTube. You can just look it up and you just type in Mr. Hall, and he's got a real friendly face, and he gives a really long, maybe 1 or 2 hour lecture to folks about everything he experienced as a person there working on the range, on Hill's test range.
Cool. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Go ahead, Zim.
Hi, Jason. At one point, you talked about the how it felt with the telepathy when you had the encounter with this guy, with this NHI. Could you go over that real quickly with everybody again? How it was, you had an audible language, but also how it settled in for you. And hope you're doing good, man. And do you know when the Fox stuff is going to start promoting this thing? Is there a release date now?
A tentative release date. I know James has been always looking at the end of summer, August, September. I know that he and I spoke just last week, and yeah, he's working really hard. He is past the point where he's, kind of gotten everything mapped out, and he had the narrator put in all of the narration pieces, and he's had to readjust all the time frames to make sure the movie's the right length. And he's putting in the credits, that sort of thing. So he's still got some work to do, and I think he wants to do some trailers as well. So that means it's at least a few more weeks, if not a month from now. So maybe August at the earliest, September, whatever. That might be another possibility, but I don't know for sure. And just wants to make sure that it's not in conflict with any other films that are coming out. So he's working with all that. As for the telepathy, yeah, to describe it audibly, he was speaking another language, but I've tried to describe it before, and I'll repeat it here, and that is, when I'm speaking to you now, since we're all speaking the same language, we're attaching meaning to words very quickly with our brains, whether we're receiving or we're the ones who are talking at the time. So communication is very, very quick. And when I think back to the time when he was talking to me in this other language, it was like a very quick kind of knowing what he was going to say before he said it, feeling. In other words, I got the understanding of the words just before he was speaking them in his language. And the meanings seem to be exactly the way I understand meanings for words myself. So there's something that goes on either in my brain or the way that their brains are, or maybe we're exactly the same when it comes to our communication on that telepathy level. It felt just like, my own thoughts were coming and going, but I had to have the wherewithal to know when, say, like emotions were displayed in some of the way that we talk back and forth, that, yeah, I felt a strong emotion of disgust at one point because I mentioned, him looking for some things that I mentioned a group of people that he didn't like. And I was like, well, I'm not disgusted with these people. That thought, that emotion must be coming from him. But I had to have that wherewithal to know that I wasn't feeling that. However, it did feel just as if I was feeling it as well as he was feeling it. So there's an emotional level there that's very raw and very synchronized when you're at that level of telepathy. And then the communication is more of a conscious effort of relaying information. So the emotional and the, I guess, spoken part of the telepathy are kind of on two different levels mentally. And that's how I would describe it.
That's all.
Wow. I was going to say, Jason, I'm going to go to Christian in a second. I do want to get in a quick question about MJ12. We've heard, there's whispers of MJ12 being relevant. I see it all over Twitter. And I was curious, could you comment to any of it? And I apologize if you have in the past. I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that prospect, if you're familiar with it.
Yeah, I'm not very familiar, so I wouldn't be comfortable, but I do believe that, yes, a group such as MJ12 was formed at some point, and I'm sure it's changed names ever since, but there's always been a group of people within probably the Department of Defense or within one of the military services that probably carries the moniker that used to be MJ12, if that's what they started off with.
Awesome. Thank you. Go ahead, Christian.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Thank you again, Mr. Sands, for being here and sharing all of this with us. Again, I really appreciate it. And thank you again for your service. I had two questions for you, if that's all right. The first question is after your experience and the information that you learned in the program, how did that affect you mentally and emotionally as an experiencer? And then secondly, I was wondering how you think the public would react to learning the information that you have learned in the program, and if you think the public is ready for that information. Thank you again so much.
Okay, well, I kind of went into the program in my 20s. I was very much just a young man, thought I was doing something cool. I really didn't have an opinion one way or the other about UAP or anything else, really. I just was doing my job. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am, kind of a person. And kind of went through that. I think my revelations after a couple of years of doing the job, yeah, I started to think about things more deeply. And then further on down the line, yeah, it did affect me. Um, and also, just knowing you're not alone is just as, sobering as anything else where, you think, well, if they're here, why don't they want to speak to us, like brothers and sisters would from other life? And it makes you wonder. And um, I think that's something that's carried through is that I wonder what is it that's the problem here? And I think part of it is just, yeah, we're kind of a mess in maybe their eyes is that we need more work on us. And it seems to be what some of the abductees are saying as well is that, yeah, we are a bit of a mess, but that we are very precious to them, or at least some of them, the races consider us as being very valuable and that we have something to offer. And we just don't understand what it is and who we are to begin with. And that's something they find very kind of sad. So I think that should speak well to everybody that's listening is that, you know, if you really think about it, I mean, even if you've only had one experience or no experience and you believe that we're not alone, well, what does that really mean? I mean, do you still go out and think of the world the same way, or is it something that changes you? Well, for me, it changed me, and that's something that everybody has to consider. So that's kind of how it affected me. Now, the revelation to the public, I don't think there's going to be like chaos. I think when you've got over 70% of the population already thinking that, yeah, we're not alone, I think they'll be like, well, yeah. I think that the only discussion we're going to have is that, the world religions now are going to have to look at the texts and the manuscripts again in a new light, that perhaps these were actually eyewitness accounts of interactions in our ancient past that were part of a more overt way that they were contacting us in our ancient past. But now it seems like we're in a lull where they've left us alone for quite a while. And I think that has to do with our technological age. Um, I think they don't want to interact because they don't want us focused on the technology. They'd rather us to focus on our spiritual growth right now because I think they see it being very lopsided. And I have to agree that that's kind of us. We're very lopsided on technology. We're even letting it take over our kids' lives, with all the time to give them on their cell phones and iPads and stuff like that. So, yeah, we've gotten away from, actually talking to each other and being neighbors and going out and socializing the way we should. Um, so there's some of that to be said about the public is that I think there's going to be a change. Yeah. I mean, once we figure out we're not alone and that maybe everything's correct, that the angels have come and they want to see us do better. And that's kind of the question you have to ask yourself. But that's on a personal note and for the public, I think, is both have to kind of come to grips with it. And I'm sure there's always going to be somebody, even if, David Grush walks into, Capitol Hill with an alien in tow, I think there's still going to be some idiots that are just, oh, it's just AI, or some CGI makeup thing or whatever. They just won't believe it. So I don't think we're ever going to get away with, people like that ever coming around. I think there's some people who are just unteachable. But there's going to be a good chunk of people that are open-minded, and those are the ones that are, I think, the ones that can attain the next level and be willing to work on it, and kind of leave the others in the dust because they're unable to. So that's where I'm at with the way that the public would look at it.
Awesome. I can't see any hands right now, but I think Moonspell is up here. Moonspell, I think you could go. I don't think you've had a chance to talk yet.
All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you, Jason, for taking these questions and for the hosts. I want to digress a little bit back to when you mentioned souls, Jason. As I've been studying more and more the topic and listening to interviews and so on, and listening to like Whitley Strieber, even Diana Basolka, and you had mentioned, I believe, some other people. It strikes me as if we're kind of in a situation where it seems like to be a war of souls, to some extent. I want to get your impression on that, because even if you look throughout history and read some of the texts, I'm led more and more down that path, and maybe some of this is even to a level leading to a facade with that objective.
I tend to agree. There's a lot of historical references to our souls or immortal souls in spirit. You find that in a lot of the ancient histories. You find that in even the more current UAP phenomena and abduction cases. It's also very important. So yeah, I think that's what I think biblically. I've read the Bible front to back, and yeah, it does reference the fact that there is a war on for our souls. Um, and that.
And
Well, go ahead.
I'm sorry, but do you also feel that there seems to be somewhat of a barrier, I guess, to the extent to what level they can interact or influence us? Almost like if there's a higher conscience that has a certain limitation over it.
Yes, I would say that, yeah, you can open yourself up to that kind of phenomenon. And it's just as people describe that are more spiritual than I am. And they say that, yeah, there's an entire world out there and level of reality where, there's possibilities that we haven't even gotten any scientific instruments to even measure in their minds. Now, I'm not a spiritist or a medium by any stretch, but I do know friends that do have some of that, and some of them are scientists. And one of them is a very precious friend of mine, and um, she's somebody I look to a lot of time for this sort of expertise. And what she would say is just that, yeah, uh, we are very precious in a spiritual sense. In that, yeah, there's all kinds of influences out there that affect you, but you've got to, like she would say, you have to be informed, and you need to know what you're up to doing.
Okay, we need 3 people to drop down that have asked questions. We've got 3 requests for people to come up, and there's not enough spaces here. Sorry.
Yeah, and sorry to the other 2 people I dropped. I was just cycling people out.
Thanks, Heather.
All right, but there is a part of this that is very yeah, you have to protect yourself, and that's something you can do. Apparently, is what I'm hearing from some of my spiritual friends, is that yes, you can protect your own soul. Um, there is a purpose for that, and you need to attach it to that source of life or your higher power, whatever you want to call that, and that gives you a source of power that's quite as very infinite and very strong, and it's the force of life in the universe, and not the force of death. So there's a part of that is attached to all life, And that's when, some of them have told me about the Akashic record as part of that, because it's all communal in some sense of the word. So those are some of the things that honestly I'm not an expert in, but I do have friends that are, that I consider experts, and that's kind of what they've been telling me, is that there's a war on for souls. There's a way to protect yourself. You have to be aware that when you expose yourself and you have bad things happen, well, guess what? You may have invited something in that you shouldn't have, and that's what I'd say.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
I do have to go after the next question.
All right, well, I saw Rich Universe up here first, so I would say, Rich, you want to go?
Well, thank you. Okay, are you aware of any events on Earth that the NHI have reacted to or influenced in any way? And what are your thoughts on the Mandela Effect? Because we talk about that a lot in these groups. Thank you, Jason.
They definitely have interacted to nuclear tests and events. That's something that I think there's been a lot of research in lately, and it's been around military bases as well, and nuclear subs, and nuclear nuclear powered carriers and things like this. So on top of that, there's the I think 1960s or something, or 40s or so. I can't remember when it was, but both the Russians and we had strange events where our missiles were shut down or turned on, and it looked like that was a show of force by the NHI, because it was also accompanied by strange lights around these nuclear facilities that had these events occur. And I think that was something that definitely they tried to influence. Now, the Mandela Effect, um, I don't know. I guess I've had deja vu before, just like everybody
Well,
else. But
I mean, like presidential elections, things like that. Do they interfere with things like that, or a reaction to it?
I would say that if there is, say, some evil forced or beings that are interested in subjugating us, I would say that they probably are doing some subvertive influences in our society, and maybe that's why we look like crap right now when it comes to our government and the corruption, Hollywood, all that kind of good stuff. I mean, we really need to get our act together. It's just as simple as us not allowing it to happen. Honestly, none of the elitists that might be espousing some of the agenda that perhaps is in line with some of the uh, bad influences that are maybe from outside our world. That's all stuff that we can take care of just by simply being us and standing up for what we know is right, and not letting them push us around. So,
Would you subscribe to the thought of them possessing? And I use that words in quotation marks, but for us to relate it back that way, of an NHI possessing our our own
oh
consciousness
yeah,
or a soul.
there's a lot of documentation on possession. I would say that that's something that does happen, and there are some real striking cases where children or other people have been taken over by another entity of some kind. I was even watching a video of it today, and it looked really scary. But I would say that those people ended up being vulnerable at some point, and allowed those entities in.
Would you put it past that being within our government?
Possibly, I would say that if it happens on a one level, it could happen at another. Yeah, it's possible. And if they're telepathic, again, that's another way they can influence. Okay, one more question.
All right, let's.
I got a question.
Hang on a second, Arthur. We got to go by hands here.
I haven't heard from Arthur yet today, and he has one more question to take, though.
Okay, Arthur, go ahead then.
Yeah. Hi, Jason. Thanks for coming on Spaces. I appreciate that. So, Mike, I've been doing a lot of research on the 29 Palms case. And what are your general feelings of that case? Do you think it's, military tech, ET, or just purely misidentification of flares? Where do you think you stand right now?
I know I was asked when it did occur, and from the research I did, there were people that initially uh, in the reporting said that, it looked like there might have been a structure craft there. However, there were other people that had reported that they did see some smoke. as if there were flares. So I'm a bit torn. I'm on the fence about it. I would like to see maybe some more imagery analysis done to prove whether there was a structured craft there or not. But yeah, it definitely looks like it was in a V shape, which is very common, commonly reported for a UAP type event. And yeah, it looked very much like it needed to definitely be looked at more closely. So that's just what I researched and was told by some of the analysts that did look at that, was that there was some smoke, according to some of the witnesses, and other witnesses said that there was a structured craft. So I don't know who you want to believe at that point, because they were all kind of Marines.
Jason, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much for stopping in here and chatting with all us.
Yes, thank
Arden,
you
thank
so
you for
much.
hosting.
Yes, thank you so much for. I saw you down there, and like I said, I wasn't sure if it was actually you, and it's like, it's you. Yes, thank you so much. This has been a pleasure having you here. You are welcome anytime.
Yeah, I think it was my blue badge that made me start speaking. The loss of my blue badge. I was like, no, it's me.
I don't
Yes, and
know.
it's very nice to have you here. Very nice.
Yeah, by the way, I did go back and restarted my subscription, so I should be getting my blue badge back so that doesn't happen again.
Okay. Yeah, nice to have you here. Thank you again.
Yep, no problem. You're welcome. You guys have a good discussion.
Have a great day.
Thanks.
If you're still there, Jason, could just quickly ask you.
No, he's not answering any more questions. He's already said that was enough.
He already dipped.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's down to
That was
listener.
great. Yeah.
Can I
I'd
just
love
say
to.
something?
Oh,
Since my hand was up for the last, I don't know how long before
Oh, I
everyone
didn't see.
else.
I thought it was a glitch. Sorry, JJS.
It's okay. Um, what I want to make a point was, Jason was saying like they think we need to grow up, which is true, and not be so technological, but yeah, they're helping us in that area. I don't know what's funny, guy.
No, I'm just. Sorry, I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing at Jason Sands and the predicament.
Anyways,
Just,
my point was, if they truly want to help us, then maybe they would help us with medicine or to heal or to like make our world a better place by getting rid of chemicals that hurt the earth or making food that doesn't hurt animals or nutrition that doesn't kill the forests or what have you. So that's one thing I wanted to say because at one, at some point he's like, I don't know if they're doing the right thing. I don't know what's involved if there's some sort of um, agreements involved. But if we really want to help ourselves, wouldn't we, instead of loading ourselves up with weapons of destruction or more tech, shouldn't we fix the problems like homelessness and the fact that there's people who don't eat and people don't have a roof over their head first and make our world a more just place first. And maybe we'll have a better world where we don't have countries that fight over resources because they have what they need. So that's all I wanted to say. I don't know what's involved, but for me, that makes more sense.
Well, Tim Taylor has claimed that he kind of channels these things, and he has done great things for like bone grafts and that kind of thing. That's tech. I think we do have the tech to do a lot of those things you're talking about without NHI helping at this point. And maybe we have it at this point because there has been help along that way. Hopefully, they intend for us to be better in all those ways and not to improve through suffering or something. But it's
I
hard to
think
know.
I think it's part of it is like the carrot dangled on the stick, right? Like you can't just like if they're I don't know, loosh farming or whatever the hell they're doing, right? Like if there's something they're getting out of us, they can't just farm us mercilessly. Like they have to make it somewhat believable, right? they engineer an environment, in my opinion, at least, it seems, that creates these scenarios in which they benefit. I don't know exactly how deep it goes. Like this agreement with Eisenhower, he was even referencing, Jason, right? Like clearly, Jason is saying he thinks there's a agreement that went wrong.
Right. So if they wanted to help, if I wanted to help another society that was younger and less, let's say, spiritual or advanced than I am, spiritually advanced, then I would help them in ways that would allow them to help themselves. But I wouldn't help them in ways that um, made them more capable of killing other humans or hurting other humans. I don't know if this force against force is working for our species to keep people in line. I mean, I don't know what the answer is because there are bad actors out there, and we can't pretend there aren't. There's crazy people out there with crazy agendas. But
Yeah, but you're looking at it from a human perspective. We can't even fathom what and how they think. So we're
true,
just speculating at that point.
true. But if you're
But
saying
if you had
probably Andrew has a better
what would you do with
perspective on
56
this.
billion? If you got
If I had
56,
$56 billion,
yeah, what would you do with
I
it?
don't know. I would likely get scientists involved in getting rid of things that hurt our earth, getting rid of things that hurt people, getting
If you
more
got it every
food.
year, do you know what you could do with 56 billion? You could eradicate poverty in America.
Right, right. But
56 with
we
20
can't
billion
think
you could do
we
it.
can't think of just America. We have to think worldwide because we
Okay,
are
but
we are a
fix your
whole.
own
We're
bed
not
first,
just
right?
yeah, but unfortunately, if one if one country doesn't have, then they're going to attack the other country who does have. So
Right.
so
Well,
my point is, I don't know what my point is. My ears are buzzing right now.
Jay, just you've got to think about it, right? When anyone has done this on the earth and shown that it can be done, like Gaddafi did, he shown that he could eradicate poverty, homelessness, bring unemployment rates down to a new low, let men and women having free education, free health, and he gets killed for it and labeled a dictator, just by doing what he wanted to do, what was right. He was trying to bridge the gap of the United States of Africa, and he got killed for it. Anybody who's ever tried to bring peace, like Kennedy, um, Kennedy wanted to bridge the gap between them and Russia. He did a full speech about it. He got assassinated. It's just one of those things that's not wanted. People don't want it. It could be done in a
So
day.
you're saying our top people just want greed and just want things the way that they want to run things because it works for them.
I
Yes,
think
No,
it's
it's not
deeper than that.
profitable. It's not
No.
profitable.
It's deeper than profit.
yeah,
Okay, like if
it could.
there are bases here on Earth that these things are running, okay, and look, you go listen to Jesse Marcel Jr. or Jesse, I think it's Jesse Marcel, whatever, the senior, right, the guy who held the craft at Roswell. If you listen to what he says at the end of his life, he says Roswell was an aircraft. He does not say a spaceship. An aircraft, as in designed to be in this atmosphere, not outside of it. Somebody is here operating within. They're not. That thing is meant to be here, and that is a very disturbing fact. And the DNA of the occupants are very close to us, so that's even more disturbing. So I think there is more motivation than profit. I think there is also like
Oh, what was the percentage of DNA?
I don't know, very close. That was the.
Well, if it's carbon based, it's going to be close, and it's either going to be that or silicone,
I'm sorry. Yeah, I mean,
right?
like it's but you know what I'm saying. They're
Yeah, as long as it's like a banana has 64%.
No, what I'm saying is they were disturbingly similar genetically.
Okay.
You think the Roswell flying saucer was not intended to go into outer
Correct.
space?
It is not a flying saucer. It's a wave ride. It's a sky rider or whatever. It's what the SR-71 is modeled after.
Yeah, they believed it. Well, they believed it was either one of the Horton brothers that they brought back, or the rotary wing that my brain's not working. James Connell, I think it was, who worked on them with the Germans. But like I say,
Was it anti-gravity though, Mike? I mean, are you saying it was or wasn't
I don't know about the
anti-gravity?
propulsion. I just know the materials that they recovered were incredible.
But that doesn't make sense that it would be limiting itself to atmospheric
What do you mean?
travel. If it has anti-gravity and advanced energy technologies and doesn't have any wings, doesn't have any
I
normal
didn't say
modes of...
anti-gravity.
Well, did it have wings?
Yes.
Yeah, it was
Listen to me
like
again. I'm going
manta
to say
shape,
this.
right?
The guy that was at the crash site, okay, the guy in the newspaper that you see in the famous Roswell newspaper who's holding that debris, right? He was also at a crash site. And he, at the end of his life, said, yes, this was some type of aircraft. He doesn't say spaceship, flying saucer. His specific words are, this was some type of aircraft. And I think that's a very...
So just that one word? That's all you have to go on?
No, are you kidding me? Oh, go look at my feed. I want you to, Arthur, go look at my feed. And it's full right now, the most recent posts. Maybe I can even put it up in there, of what it looked like from people who were there and they pieced it together.
I'll check that out.
now the Aztec crash, that was completely different. That was a crash. That's never talked about. It's a lot of people witnessed that, and
Is Aztec 50s?
No, 48, March 48.
I don't know who was first, God, Sauce, or Andrew.
Hey, I was just going to say that my personal belief is that 0 point energy is going to be something spiritual, and that's a big part of our value, you know.
Jason frickin' Sands was in my space. Wow.
Wow, that's cool, dude. Hey. Get it.
Thanks for hosting. You did a great job.
I didn't, you know something? I had no idea that he was here. I was just like scrolling down through the listeners and I saw him there and I'm like, is that really Jason Sands down there or is that just a sock? And AKA was the first one to say, no sock, that's him. So yeah, that was cool. That was freaking awesome.
I had nothing to do with it. I was gone. We were talking about him earlier, arguing with people about him.
That's right. We were talking about him. Well, maybe we said his name 3 times and he's just showed up. Who knows? But
yeah, that one guy was up in here. That one dude's like, David Crush and his 40 witnesses, and they never heard from one of them. And I'm like, oh my gosh, where have you been? And then he had totally heard of Jason Sands too. And you're like, oh, man, you were just...
He was a pain in the fucking ass from the time he got into the space. He'd never been in here before, so I gave him a chance. And I thought since, Jason Sands come in the space, he would get to the point with this question and land fast. But, no. I dropped him. I kicked his ass out as soon as he was done asking the question.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever heard one single person say someone's last name wrong so many different times. He said Grush like every way you could think of it, even ways I'd never heard before.
Same with Grider Browning. He kept calling him Grinder.
What was he saying? How was he saying Grush's
He's like
name?
Grosh, Gross.
Rerush. I was like, where are you getting this from?
But hey, you have been studying this for more than 10 years, so you don't know what you're talking about, Mike.
He was talking. He kept on calling kill Patrick or kill something, and he's like, "You got to go to the Kill Patrick office of Whistleblowers." You're like, "What the hell?"
I've never even heard of the guy before. He follows a few people that follow me, and I follow them, but I've never seen this person before in space before. So I don't know.
I've seen him a couple times in Shane's or
Well, that explains it.
Lou's spaces.
Oh, that even really explains it. Okay.
Yeah, he was one of these guys that are. But I like to let him have his say, and then
Yeah,
see
for
where it
sure.
falls short. It's easy to fall into that and be just. It's almost more cynical than skeptical. Where you're like, oh come on, if it's real, then show me the damn aliens. It's easy to fall back to that.
Oh yeah, like I mean, I'm always
this
willing to
guy
give
just
a new person in a space a chance, but I mean, holy crap, he really took advantage of that one. Wow.
he wants his disclosure and he wants to eat it too. That's just not going to happen. And calling Tim Ventura an influencer, come on.
Let's not leave Andrew hanging. What's up, buddy? Long time no see. How you doing?
Hey, pretty good. Thanks, Heather. I wanted to respond to Jay Just because she raised a very important question, and I might have missed the second half. Y'all went off in a different direction. But what I think she started out saying is, well, how come we're getting this technology, but it's not helping us? I mean, I'm sorry, Just, I couldn't name about 16 things that you did that are all, people are starving. We got all kinds of useful, medical technology. I don't know if I'm allowed to do that, Arden. I hope you don't mind, but the thing I put up in the nest, if it went, is yesterday I posted an interview with I guess it's George Norrie, Coast to Coast from back in the day, and it's with Jim Sparks. So Jim Sparks responds. It's in if you look at part 2, I'm sorry, it's actually like part 8 or 9. Somebody chunked this into 10-minute segments, which is convenient. But if you go to like part 7 or 8 or 9, Jim Sparks says they did. He says they went to all the world leaders. Now the they here is a good question. Which group? Jim Sparks was abducted consciously so many dozens, probably hundreds of times. He calls it being pulled, that he's really unique. He's a lot more like Fringe, who may still be listening. He never came to embrace the Greys as our saviors, any of that BS. But what he did do was, after enough of these abductions, he stopped. He stopped fighting them because he was, really a hostile abductee, like I think a lot of people are. But to get to the point, he said that it sounds like it must be the Greys or one of the groups of the Greys. Maybe it was some others. He never mentions the tall whites that I recall, but he does say that we were given all kinds of beneficial technology. Certainly things that would help. I think he names the different things it would have done. Would have helped to clean the oceans, perhaps the atmosphere, things that most likely, as far as I'm concerned, the crop circles are proof positive that if there's any NHI involvement in that, they are trying to help us. Monsanto and Bayer are doing their thing with GMOs, um, modified ingredients and all this. But meanwhile, the food in a crop circle, the grain, whatever it is that's growing, tends to be healthier and it tends to have a more abundant yield. But Jim Sparks didn't get into that in particular. He just was interested in the fact that, according to him, and I think he would know, I've never heard a more articulate presentation of, hey, here's the ways they tried to help us. But look, this is aerospace. This is the defense industry. They're interested in one thing. And so they weaponized technologies that were never intended to be used that way. And that's why ET stopped giving us this stuff, because, we probably could cure any cancer on the planet. But between our own wholesale destruction of the rainforests, which is what humanity tends to do, and between weaponizing these technologies, I mean, look, they stopped doing that. And if there were groups, who is it that basically tells us that the Roswell craft or certain of these others may have been Trojan horses? I think that you have to, consider that any group that's hostile or doesn't really want to see us succeed, sure enough, they might give us a Trojan horse. So I don't leave that off the table. I believe that too. But I think those that really wanted to help us probably did try, and I think we see the result. And that just took us farther down the road of, well, no wonder they can't come out and disclose and say, yes, we would really like to, not just with technology, as people point out. I think it's really our consciousness. I think it's the raising of our spirit or our spirituality or whatever you want to call it. That to me is the $1 million question, or the 64,000, whatever. But I just wanted to share that because instead of, well, why don't they? I think they did. I think they went to all the world leaders. Well, I think you could call Jim Sparks a liar, buddy. But buddy, I just want to finish. But and I'll land it. But that's you. And if you think Jim Sparks made all that stuff up, Good for you.
See, now you're putting words in my mouth. I've listened to Jim Sparks extensively, and there are things as such things as screened memories, right? So Jim Sparks could very well be experiencing. I think he would even admit this. He is experiencing what they want him to experience, despite how real it may seem. I remember him talking about how he helps he helps them abduct people. I've heard the whole shtick. I've listened to hours of Jim Sparks. However, at the end of the day, I still have to say this: people are being taken, okay, and they are being taken against their will. Generally speaking, nobody's signing any waivers, and women are experiencing gynecological issues. And I'm saying there are bad actors. Now, where are the good actors? Where are the overt good actions that I can track and trace? Because I don't see them. I see people
Well, you're not
saying they
looking.
have good
Mike,
experiences.
I'll give you one. Valiant Thor. There was nothing negative that happened from the Venusian contacts. I can give you a dozen more. But, buddy, you tend to have a bias, and you tend to see what you want to see. And if you can listen to everything that Jim Sparks has to say, he never said, by the way, I helped them with the abductions. What he says is, if there's already people abducted and they sent him out there and said, look, comfort these people, and he does it because he started to talk to them and tell them
told
things.
him what to do. I listened to him, bro. He
Well, dude,
even
I'm
described
sorry.
himself
Hey, Mike.
as helping on abductions. That's what he just, and he even he was like, I told them they're just going to take you inside and do some tests, and then the aliens told them you're telling them too much. I remember that part too.
That's right. And so they actually locked him down. They said, hey, that's too much. We just need you to comfort these people. So what are you going to do, Mike?
He was suspicious. He was very suspicious why they told him it was too much, as I recall. It wasn't.
Well,
it wasn't just. He felt like it was an innocent piece of information he could share, and then he was told, no, it's not. That they have to withhold information from these people that's obvious and innocent.
Look, I'm just telling you this. If you're in Jim Sparks' case and you've been abducted against your will, pulled out of your body, and it's being ripped out of your body, and you don't like that, ask friends how it is if you don't know. If you're having this go on and they say, here's a room full of people in this craft who have been pulled, and he knows that's against their will. Some of them are in the middle of lovemaking. Some of them were driving down the road. These are people, and look, what are you going to do? If you don't cooperate, then they're just going to lock you down and force you to sit there, and
or
you're not
they'll
going
get the wand. Think about all the people who experience almost rape-like conditions.
Hey, man, I'm just trying to put you in that scenario where you're Jim Sparks, and if you do comfort two or three of these people...
Jim Sparks is not the rule. He is the exception. Most people's experiences are not like his.
He is
talking
the
about
exception.
what Jim Sparks experiences is kind of a disservice to the entire community.
You know, I've noticed this about you, Mike. You really like to jump down people's throat when they say the least little thing that doesn't go over with you. And
I just said I disagree with you.
Well, you don't have to. Hey, look, I don't care whether you disagree with me or not. I have a little bit better gauge for determining what's really going on here than I've noticed.
Oh, you're better than me. Oh, I'm
no,
sorry.
I just have a better.
Oh, here we go, another one doing this.
My fault. I apologize. I didn't realize you were better than me.
No,
I will next time respect
there's your words in my mouth, pal. If you don't
I'm
like
really
it, don't do
glad
it.
that Jason Sands is left now because he really wouldn't want to hear this.
Okay, well, Jason Sands probably does know about Jim Sparks. If he doesn't, I would encourage him to check out the videos. I linked the second one at the very bottom of the second list of these chunked videos. That's with Art Bell.
He's not here anymore. He's already left the space.
Okay. He's already left. I'm sorry. Well, what I'm pointing out, though, again, about Jim Sparks is that he's just one person, and there are many others who have gone to some length to say, we have received help, medical technology, and technology that could clean up the damage that humanity is doing to its own environment. And what have we done with those technologies? We've weaponized them. Mike, if you want to bring up other, you're like over here talking about the abductions. I don't deny any of that's happening. That's the whole story. The only thing that's really unique about Sparks is that he was conscious for all of his experiences. And in my book, that stands to reason that, well, maybe then he remembers things a little bit better than
other people like Ted Rice,
who have been regressed or who have pulled these things out of, confused memories. And he's not saying at the very end of all his experiences, and we haven't heard from him for 20 plus years, I'd like to point out, he was never on board with the Greys agenda. And you yourself acknowledge that that's what he said. All right. I'm just saying that in his experience, yes, there have been technologies provided. And I think that we can confirm that. It's just a matter of what we would do with those. I'm sorry?
What technology?
Some of that technology, the medical technology, has already made it into the public sector. I'm sorry, and you can get if you go and put your hand under some of these machines. If you get your hands scanned today, certain medical technologies can look beyond the skin to the circulatory system, and that is a partial implementation of these things that were given to us decades ago. Susie Hansen from New Zealand is another experiencer who has been on board the craft, has been under these machines, and some of them can look into your internal, anatomy, and they can not only scan, some of them can do repairs. They even did that for Jim Sparks. They pulled a bunch of gunk out of his lungs because he was a very heavy smoker at the time, and it's kind of gross the way he describes it. It's in the video if you listen to it, and I thought, well, that's at the surface
They
of it.
just needed him to live a little longer, so they pulled that stuff out and said,
Sure,
look,
sure.
Yeah, it's only if it benefits them.
Well,
they probably put the stuff in there in the first place.
I just want to go. Yeah, no, he's a heavy smoker, guy. He was a heavy smoker, and that's what they pulled out of his lungs. But Mike made a point. If it benefits them, they don't want us to blow this planet up either, because some of them are in these underground bases, and if they're not, I know they could get off quicker than we can. But the point is, if the planet goes to pot and it's no longer a survivable entity, a survivable planet, they can't use it. Their resource, they lose their ability to be here. At least some of them would. So you make a good point, but nevertheless, they don't want us to blow it up either. So anyway, and I'm sorry I'm contentious. It's just sometimes I like to go ahead, make my point. I'll leave some information, and I don't like to get don't try to run me off the road at the end of it just because you got an axe to grind somewhere with ET intelligence, man. There are benevolent.
What the fuck? You think I have an axe to grind with ET
yeah,
intelligence?
I do.
No breaks, people.
All right, enough of that. But thanks very much.
I don't have an axe to grind with ET intelligence outside of that they're taking people without consent. I mean, that seems, and I'm not saying all of them, but geez.
The theme of the show tonight is grinder and axe to grind. Let's see if we can go for a third grind.
As people like, oh, benevolent aliens gave us medical technology. I don't know. I disagree. I didn't say he's like dead wrong.
I think they did. I think Day After Roswell kind of goes over that a little bit.
You know what I mean? It's like curing cancer. It's like they crashed some stuff that we reinvented and turned into, stuff that's applicable. It sounds to me like he's saying like they're going to give us med beds.
Well, where do you think Gary Nolan got his patents from? Maybe they're leaking out these technologies into the public sector covertly.
I don't doubt that they can.
It's not Gary.
Go ahead, Cam. Sorry.
Yeah, not Gary Nolan's patents. You guys are forgetting about somebody else.
Hey, Arthur, are you still scrapping with John Greenwald Jr.?
Tim Taylor's patents.
I am still scrapping with Greenwald.
All right.
And
Zim, what was that?
Is it Tim Taylor's patents?
Oh shit. Okay, 3 technologies that have been de-weaponized and given for public use for free. One is the internet. Number 2 is the onion router. And number 3 is GPS. Now, I'm not associating those with anything NHI, technology of unknown origin. No. I'm just saying those are just 3 examples. There's many more of the government, DOD in this case, saying, here you go. We developed this internally, but we see, let's, for whatever reason they did it, let's release it, open source it, call it a day.
Honestly, I believe the only technology that they have exchanged with us is super collider technology. The strange fascination about building those types of machines, possible universe killers. Do you know what I mean? We have no idea what they could do, what they would do. The chances of them igniting our atmosphere or tearing apart the fucking fabric of the universe was unknown. And for them to go ahead and do that is even worse than splitting the fabric of reality, just breaking the atom. I mean, the thing is, when people like Jason Sands come along, I appreciate them coming out and stuff, but why now? What's the motivation? Why not back when it was a big deal to him? I mean, when it was happening. I mean, I've said the same thing for years, but just because it's come out from a group who are big in the UFO world, is it any different than me, a veteran who's had many encounters, knows a lot about the subject because of those encounters, and has a very tight ties with somebody who was heavily involved.
Jason
You know what I mean?
Sands work on like the program though.
Do you mean what, like the move on Bass Star Impact projects?
I'm sorry, what? I'm talking about like DoD.
Those are not associated with the program, by the way.
Or like,
so because I know you not you, Mike, but I know I've heard you confuse both OSAP Bass and ATIP with the program. They were never affiliated with the program.
Right. Yeah, there was only OSAP.
No, OSAP as well was never affiliated with the program.
they wish they
Right.
were.
Exactly.
So what was part of the Red Team core program, or?
No, that's just a role. The Red Team is an MOS within the U.S. military, and is now part of the whole defensive cyber operations. Red teaming.
I tell you what, any projects as deep as that, they don't get out. They don't slip out. They really don't. And to think they do is just ridiculous. Because, I mean, people like Forrestal, who wanted to disclose that he wasn't happy with what was going on, they killed the Secretary of Defense.
But that was like 60 years ago or 70 years ago. Like things might have changed a little bit.
In what way, though?
Like maybe they
People
realized,
didn't live too long back then.
Maybe they realized that the office of President of the United States needs to have executive authority over this issue, and that they can't wrestle it from whoever's running it.
Well, if that's the case, the deal that they apparently made in 1954 was the first meeting with the 5 races. I think it was Edwards Air Force Base for a week, and then in April, Eisenhower went missing at Palm Springs, and apparently made the agreement with the Greys, and that was the deal where they swapped technology. They were allowed to abduct people, and they didn't have to disarm their weapons. Whereas the first deal was it'd help us grow our consciousness, and that would heal us and help us gain a better understanding of life, and we'd have to disarm our weapons of mass destruction and wouldn't swap technology, and turn that down. And it's quite well documented. The both cases, the BRSA memo that was out, and there's another document, I can't remember which one it is, but these were out before the MJ12 booklet come out and all that crap. But that's I mean, the president, he just doesn't go missing for a few hours off a golf course.
He needed some dental work. Come on now. Emergency dental work.
Yeah, I got a question for you, Guy. So if you think that there was a treaty, do you think the State Department was involved in any sort of treaty? Because they're generally involved with international treaties.
Mine's not working as great, but I'm pretty sure it was the World Security Council. MJ12 had been formed by them as well. We've got to remember. But it's a multitude of scientists. It's around the time when they were doing the Arctic basically split. You know what I mean? Everybody's got a kind of fair share of the Arctic, the Outer Space Treaty as well. Oppenheimer and Einstein supposedly did the inhabitants of foreign celestial bodies. Keogh was coming out all the time, pretty much about to speak disclosure. One time he did, they turned his microphone off. Admiral Byrd was shut up, and Alan Dulles was keeping him at bay. You know what I mean? It was pretty clear what was going on. People believe now that Congress are doing the most they've ever done to look into this project and look into this topic, but that's complete bullshit. The amount of stuff that they did were project signed with the U.S. Weather Service. It was the first group that were investigating the reports. Any that went further went to the OSI, and that's when they developed a special team that would deal with these things and how to deal with because if you think about it, back then we were barbarians. We're still barbarians now, but there was no equal rights. There was no racism was everywhere. Religion was everywhere. Everybody was. We were still fighting against each other. So for any alien species to come and give us anything, to think that we are ready for that, because we're not a civilization as one that can actually go further to other planets. If we get to another planet, we're going to fight over it. If we get to another one, we're going to fight over that as well. And that's not the way that space travel works for a world. It's just not. We are nations at the moment, divided, and there's two sides. And America does get so much propaganda. Honestly, it's ridiculous. It's so crazy. Because you really do not get the proper spread of news. It's mental, and I do believe that we are being fed a system to where we are going to have to do one or the other. And if you don't think that Russia, China, and all the East have got better technology, so further ahead, I'm going to shut up anyway because I'm just chatting on. But it's one of those. It's disclosure is not going to happen. I know everyone wants it to, but it's not going to happen. If disclosure happens, then the truth about how they've hid this, how the government have been abducting people, not aliens. Aliens wouldn't need to. You know what I mean? They can travel obviously light years, so why would they need to? Why would they need to abduct us? They could just take a sample, easy enough.
I
Wouldn't need
just
to take
hear
the full
you
body.
vilifying the government and calls, and now they're abducting the people too, and it's a, you know,
My
it's.
lab, blah blah
I'm not
blah.
hero worshiping my government, but my government isn't the evil empire, dude. It's just not. Sorry.
Whatever.
Zim, Zim,
America. Fuck
You
yeah.
Zim,
got 4 other governments out there.
Can I talk about
There you
laser
go.
Zim.
You
technology
got
really quick?
yes,
Thank
please.
you. My dad had patents for that. So did his other Raytheon friends and CIA friends. He didn't have an engineering degree. How did he get patents for that? It was utilized in the automotive field. So when Jason Sands brought up that lasers might have been a technology or an aspect of it that we gained from the craft, you might want to think about that. Also, who is the head of Aero? Kirkpatrick. What technology did he help develop at Lockheed Dobbins in Georgia, where he was the laser golden boy? Put it together.
He was the laser gun. Yep. He did a ton of that
So are you
research.
kind of suggesting that these reverse engineering programs are, distributing these technologies through individuals with patents as some sort of a laundering operation?
I wouldn't say laundering. I would say if you're going to seed technology through people, who do you seed it through? To society.
The day after Roswell, Corzo goes over what he said his job was in the White House, and it was he would feed it to the places that are already developing similar things, and he was disseminating that stuff out and passing it along. Some from crash retrievals, specifically Roswell's, and
But I'm curious about the money angle, because we're talking about hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars in these patents. Like, could this be a source of funding for these programs? Like, maybe they make a deal so on, like, you can have this patent, but we get 80% of the revenue back towards our program. You get to keep 20.
I have no idea about that. But the program was called Laser Guard. And then they wanted to work on a program called Force Tracker, which would be being able, and this is in the late 80s, being able to track people by satellite. So let's say you have a terrorist or a target, you could track them by satellite. And I think it was potentially wanting to use some form of surveillance for that. So Force Tracker was that, but there were other competitive patents at the time because a lot of people kind of thought of the idea at the same time. So that patent didn't go through. I don't know in terms of any programs getting money back. I know that the people in LaserGuard, AG Systems, NASA Technologies were all former Raytheon and CIA employees. Some of them, one of them, was a CIA pilot and had Naval and Air Force wings and claimed that he saw something in a hangar that defied the laws of physics. But nobody wants to listen to a woman
Wonder
say
who that
that.
was. Well, no, you came back. We're glad that you came back.
Thanks. I had a bad experience and I'm just over it. But Jason, when he said the laser thing, my brain okay. I think it's how humans individually have chosen how to use it. The laser guard was used for automotive technology for etching, chemical etching. So using a chemical aggregate along with a laser device on a machine gun type apparatus, which is funny to think about. You use this apparatus to put the VIN number on windshields, and the VIN number is your vehicle identification number. So it wasn't a securities capacity. And Toyota was one of the companies that took up this procedure, and they imported it in many of their ports in the southeast of the United States, or southeast distribution center or production centers. So it's like I think some of these guys were like, oh, we have interest in cars, so let's put it towards, that and we're also involved in securities, so we can kind of get it over that way.
Well, Felix, since you brought that up, is it possible that there are people visiting these spaces that have filed some of these patents?
Maybe the daughter of somebody.
The older crowd that used to frequent some of these
Oh,
spaces.
let's see. Let me check. Let me see who's in the space right now. Are you? I'll just look, but I won't say.
Not right now. No, not right now. No. Just, historically.
I don't know. I wouldn't know about that.
Also,
I wouldn't know.
don't forget about strategic defense system. Don't forget about that. That was the first real world use of global warning and global defense using lasers from space.
Yeah, I've had questions about that.
Wasn't it that Philip Corso wasn't Philip Corso very, very much integrated into that project?
According to his claims. Also, the whole when Reagan was president, the whole Star Wars systems, hundreds of American and allied scientists disappeared, and it most likely was a sort of just going under, getting off the radar to work on these things. And once that happens, you can also expect that they wouldn't be able to have their name on those patents that these scientists were working on. You know what I mean?
Well, there were rumors that the Dulce base was actually a Star Wars, like something where they tested some Star Wars operation weaponry in the 80s. So just want to point that out. So when you bring up Star Wars, there is a significance there. And those programs, a lot of stuff came out of those. I remember, there's a word that a lot of like these old nerds who I say nerd because my dad was one of them, who are like involved in this say, and my dad said it years ago, widgets. They say widgets all the time. And I remember when the cell phone came out, my dad was playing with the apps, but it was like they're called widgets on, I guess it was like whatever phone he was using. And he was like, they call it widgets. That's what we called it. Like, but he would say things in passing, right? He would never say it directly. So I thought that was funny. But Dodie always used the word widgets to kind of like describe whatever stuff they were working on. And who knows, Dodie's a weirdo. I don't like, you can't believe half of what he says, but I thought that was funny. Widgets.
They're called widgets. So like your little weather app on the home screen on your phone, that's a widget.
Yeah, when my dad saw that when those first came out, when the cell phones first came out, and he said that he saw they were called widgets, or that was the nickname. He was like, "That's what I was calling uh something similar back in the day." It was
That
something that they
thingamabob.
called it. And like if this was in the private sector, they were calling those little apps or things widgets long ago. That's all I'm saying. So when we got it and it was called widgets, they were calling it widgets then. I think that's what I'm trying to say. Sorry.
I got a question for you, Ophelia. You posted a video that you took of a daylight UFO encounter you had, and I thought it was really interesting. Do you want to kind of tell us what happened?
It's weird. Um I started remembering my contact event this past 2023 with my friend who had the encounter with me. And it brought into perspective a lot of other things. And so I had this like joy that I can't explain. And I started feeling like it's really fucking lame and stupid, but I started feeling so spiritual, like because I was remembering stuff. I'm like, so I'm just being funny, but to bring levity. But it got me into this really deep mindset, and I started praying on that hilltop where I saw that thing. And the day where that orb showed up, I had been praying at that spot, and missing my dad, and just contemplating about stuff, and it showed up, and it was very interesting. I don't. It definitely announced itself to me, like in a personal way, you know. Um, when people like, if you've ever had a spiritual moment where you're meditating or praying and you feel like something else is kind of speaking back to you or giving you a feeling, I had that before that event. So
You think it could have been your father, like in a different form or something?
I mean, could have been. I had brought a spirit box up there, which is like one of those ghost boxes where they can use the frequencies if anything's around. It flips through all the frequencies and they can use it to speak to you if anything's nearby. And I got a message that I keep to myself. It's very private of what I was told, but it seemed like it didn't seem like my dad, although it said my father was close.
So maybe it was an extraterrestrial craft of some sort, and they're in contact with your father? Who knows?
I don't know. I mean, it was the orb for sure. And what what was interesting was it did this little dance, and it looked like a shining bird or something. And I was like, oh, it reminded me of a dove.
Yeah, daylight UFO videos aren't very common, so that is, very interesting that you got that. And thanks for sharing it because I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, thanks for asking about it. I'm still trying to put it together myself, honestly. Um, I've I think the big thing that if there is anything positive out there, it just wants us to be peaceful and do the golden rule and not be dicks to each other. And the moment you get prideful in your beliefs, whether it's a religious belief or any dogmatic belief, scientific, religious, or whatever, is like when you're fucked. Like pride is the downfall of all of us. I don't know anything. That's all I've felt from whatever is positive that's trying to connect with a lot of people, is it's trying to say, that we can be peaceful and that we have that capability to get along and treat each other as we want to be treated. Guy's had his hand up. Sorry, go guy.
Screen's on his hand up longer than me.
Yeah, it's all good. We don't need
Yeah,
hands. It's back to our guys, no breaks.
Well, I have some other questions about that general area, Ophelia. Do you know anything about 29 Palms Base? And have you heard anything about like deep underground bases or any sort of activity in that area?
Um, yeah, yummy. Sorry, doing mom stuff at the same time. There's all kinds of weird stuff being seen up here. My friend Lana, who is not a UFO person, just another mom I met, like you meet people in mom groups. She saw like like a swarm of these things up in Landers, which is like where the Integratron is and all that shit. And Landers is right next to the base. And these things, they disappear. If it's our technology, then we've mastered interdimensional technology, period. Because we're seeing them and
Or
then
stealth.
they
It
just
could be
disappear.
invisibility. It could be invisibility too.
Right. It could be like a cloaking, maybe, if they have like a graphic technology where it can actually completely simulate its surroundings. Which, I mean, then it's like, okay, yeah. I don't know. That's the question. If we're seeing it up here, is it ours? Is it theirs? Is it back engineered? All those things. So who fucking knows, man? But it's there's a lot of shit up here we're seeing that doesn't make sense to our little human brains and our five senses, our limited five senses. I'll say that.
And that's near Joshua Tree National Park as well, which I know is a big hot spot, like a vortex type spot.
Yeah. There's I don't know. I tend to think that huge craft that they saw at the Marine base is real because I've seen similar sorry, I'm eating chocolate and I can't talk apparently. I've seen similar kind of triangular looking things here. My therapist, who I went to when I started remembering all this, ended up sitting in a chair next to me and showing me a video of a triangular craft with an orb floating next to it. So she said, "You don't really need to come to me as much anymore because I know you're not fucking crazy." It's hilarious. So even my therapist has admitted there's something else going on up here, and whether it's government or alien, who knows?
Yeah, I appreciate you commenting on my 29 Palms post because I am kind of like I'm the only person doing research on that case, and pretty much everyone, the debunkers and the believers, think that it's a bullshit case, basically. But it's a really important case because we have so many witnesses and we have so many videos and we have so many photos. It's a very information dense case. And I really think that there's some sort of cover up happened because I do not buy that Arrow, contacted or sent an email to Greenwald to issue a statement, within 24 hours of Corbell publishing. No way the government would do an investigation and publish something that fast unless they knew ahead of time.
Well, and the thing, I don't think you heard this last time we spoke for a limited amount of time. When my husband and I were driving, of course, as I'm trying to talk about this, while my husband and I were driving through Landers or that area, like Johnson Valley, on the other side of the base, going towards Big Bear, you get like a really good view of the backside mountains, right? And there was a big ass silver thing up in those hills, like sun reflecting back off of it. Now, whether that was a huge hangar with something in it or a craft that was reflecting the sun and it was shiny, it was near the base. It was very big and it was just back there. So you'd have to go on like
Well,
ATVs and all kinds of shit to get to it, but I'm sure they probably have it pretty guarded where you couldn't get too close going the back way if you wanted,
if you know where it is, I can look it
That,
up on Google.
Yeah,
yeah, that may have been a radar dish.
it could have been.
Very, very common to have those surrounding the base.
That's good to know. It could have been. Or how large are they typically?
And they're some of those things are massive diameter wise. And they will reflect light like no other.
Oh, okay. That had to
It'll
have been.
burn your eyes too from the reflection
Oh,
sometimes.
yeah,
I've
AKA,
seen
I
them.
wanted to ask you about the 29 Palms case. What's your take on it right now?
Well, I think you nailed it with how you just described the amount of. So I haven't looked at all the videos, definitely all the angles and stuff. But I think that I'm glad someone's looking into this because you're right. The amount of observers, trained observers, are huge. And it's just one of those things. Do those really resemble flares? Like, that's what we really need to compare it to, is another exercise. Why were so many of them didn't know that
I
an
don't know, but my
exercise was
power
happening?
just went out in the middle of the fucking desert, so I gotta go.
This is just like that coast to coast call, man.
29 Palms, I'm telling you, it's a hot case.
Yeah.
Yeah, that thing that call in Zoom with Art Bell, that was something else, eh?
But I did post I have a master thread with all of my evidence, all the different videos, all the witness testimony at 5 witnesses on record. I put that up in the nest. If you just look in the thread, you'll find it. So yeah, that's all right there.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Dr. Screen.
No, it looks like he's gone.
He
Goodbye.
disappeared, didn't he?
Well, I'll keep talking about 29 Palms. I guess some of my analysis of the FOIA release. So John Greenwald got some FOIA photos and videos that seem to be the nail in the coffin, quote unquote, to that case. And I analyzed the metadata and compared it to the metadata of the witnesses, and it basically showed that they did not match at all, and that there's some serious incongruity there. So I think that there might have been staged after the event as some sort of pre-bunking.
Have you ever seen the technology? I'll go. Okay, one sec. Have you ever seen
They
the
wouldn't even
technology?
need to do that. Yeah, all they have to do, because those are just text matches. When you submit a FOIA request, they're just going to say, okay, match this word. Let's find anything that matches this word, anything that matches this word. And they provide whatever media that is. So what that could have been was simply, I don't know how specific. And so that's what we're not seeing when he gets sometimes he publishes the response directly from them, but what we don't know is in the media what matched his request. And so those videos and whatever I think there were some photo stuff, could have been from whenever the fuck, or not even affiliated with.
But the
that event.
metadata shows the times that they were taken, though. So it was yes, the precise time.
Okay, and did it match?
Well, it was the same day and roughly the same time, but it was about 17 minutes wrong. If you look at the photos with the 5 burnt out flares and the 2 loom rounds flares, if you compare that with some of the photos we have from the witnesses, it shows that the 5 lights are fully illuminated 17 minutes after the photo of the 5 burnt out flares. So that doesn't match up.
Interesting.
Do you realize the actual full extent of what's capable in the air? I hear so many people going, "Oh, I've seen a green flashing light," and they don't kind of realize that green flashing lights are what the military use on anti-collision drones and anti-incursion drones. And they've been using these a lot because Russia has been turning off their transponders and just fucking flying willy-nilly over UK's airspace, America's airspace. And don't get me wrong, Zim, I lived in America for a year, man. I love America. It's fucking beautiful. It's companies and hedge funds running bits that are fucking placed there. Do you know what I mean? It's one of those. I'd love to see people like you. You know what I mean? People like Heather J. just actually running the communities. Would stand a far better chance then. But the stuff that they have in the air currently, they have stealth jets which have 3D printers on them, which can print something in the middle of air, print a drone, and then release it and let it go. They have all this technology. They've had this technology for a long time, and the technology that they received off the Germans was so far ahead. The stuff off BMW and Skoda, the ideas that the Horton brothers had, they'd already had discs and single wings. that had them doing endurance flights. I think the longest one was like 11 hours. And the spate of reports after that and the stuff that went on was very, very peculiar. And people don't, that's what I mean, people don't look back on these cases. I mean, 29 Palms cases, 27 dresses. Man, there's so many great cases that have got so much data, so much evidence, and just overlooked. There's so much audio out there of witness testimonies. There's the full Betty and Barney Hill lie detector, everything, every single interview and part of that story is recorded on tape on the Wayback Machine, just there. And it's crazy. People, I don't know, people. It's just a matter of what you want to believe. Do I believe that our government's been good, or do I believe that our government's been bad? Because it's not down to aliens. It's down to us at the end of the day. We will deliver our own.
Guy, you bring up a really good point, and I think James Fox, when he was on Joe Rogan, got asked that question, like, run me through the best cases of the 20th century, like, give me your top 10 or whatever. And I think that would be a really useful exercise for the community. Like, what do you think that, top, let's say 50 cases are as far as strength goes? Like historically, and going back all the way to Blue Book and to modern time now, I think it'd be useful to like present to people like Joe Rogan.
And that's what I mean. Those 3 videos, and any case since I don't know, since what year Brazil was, but I think there's only been one pretty solid case in the 2000s.
Stephenville? Are you talking about Stephenville, Texas?
My mind's not born at the moment, but no, it was the Brazil. It was the Brazil case. Case was it? Man? Oh, I can't remember. I'll find it in a minute. But yeah, the disclosure's been around for so long. People have been talking about it for years. You know what I mean? And we've got to think, why has it not happened? If it's real, why has it not happened? It's because us as species aren't getting there. Who's preventing us from getting there? We've got the means, we've got the resources. We had the resources to evolve into such a being that we can grasp the fucking meaning of space travel. So how can we do space travel if we've not grasped the meaning of actually being social and interacting and working as a species? I mean,
well, just my 2 cents on why it hasn't happened yet. Well, I think one big thing is Project Mockingbird. So our intelligence agencies, and I guess if you think MJ-12 is a real thing, some sort of breakaway above the president organization cabal is pulling the strings of our entire country and the entire world. So if they control the media, they control the minds of the American people. And with social media now, their control is getting even better and better.
Well, one of the nicknames, Arthur Exxon, Brigadier General Arthur Exxon, who wanted to know about what happened at Roswell, and they said, you don't have a need to know. So he did his own investigation, by the way, and flew his own planes over the crash site. But and he showed it to my childhood home when I was a kid, and I only realized who he was just this past year researching all this. He called them the Unholy 13, and he was spooked. He knew he was getting bugged. He knew he was being watched because he wanted to know what was going on. And the Pentagon interviewed him, some Pentagon workers, and some people with the Pentagon, and they said he seemed very scared when Arthur Exxon was trying to whistleblow 50 fucking years ago. So yeah.
Ophelia, guess who number 13 was? For the folks that have done their research in here, you may have heard this before.
Are you
a Freemason or something? Who knows?
I think AKA is basing it
No.
off of the MJ-12 documents, which listed 12 names. And then are you saying there's another name?
Yeah. Also, it's because Forrestal was killed. and he was replaced.
No, we've
No.
already mentioned him. It's that easy. We've actually already mentioned him, and he's admitted to it.
Corso? Who?
Yeah, it was Corso. Was number 13.
Well, I'm not.
Haven't there been some ethical issues with him? I don't know much about him. If anybody could clue me in.
Well, his son is barely still alive. He's got several interviews out there, really interesting ones.
Is his son barely still alive because of him?
No, well, no, he's got stage 4, but he's up there in age. You know,
Oh,
some
okay, gotcha.
great interviews with his kid.
I'm like, did Corso's ghost come back and he's ascended, but he's a bad ghost and he's about to kill his own kids? Sorry, I was just my brain went on a whole,
No,
you know.
I don't know if Corso was the part of MJ13. I think you would know more than he does.
well, this wasn't MJ. This was not MJ. This was this group. Ophelia, you brought it up, and it was mentioned to him in an interview, and he said, "Yeah, I was that number 13." So whoever the interviewer was at the time knew that he was somewhat affiliated, or that there was. I mean, obviously, the names get assigned to groups always.
It's like the 13th apostle. He never gets mentioned. You always get screwed.
My guess is there's like 100 people who think they're the 13th member, but they're not. There's only 12.
Well, these groups don't exist anymore. I mean, this was just at that given time.
I think there probably still is MJ12. Why would it have changed if it's a lifelong membership and there's 12 members on the council, we'll call it? I would suspect, I mean, you're talking a lot of power in 12 people. They're not going to change things. They want to keep things the same.
It'll get smaller.
Would it be generational then?
It'll be like Game of Thrones. There can only be one. So you got that so long ago, it'll get down to everybody's listening to one guy. Or girl.
Yeah, there's only one return, and that's the Jedi, not the King.
There were no girls in it. They ain't listening to us back then. They didn't give a fuck about us then. They kind of do now, but definitely didn't now then. So no, it was all men.
I think George.
You saw who they pulled.
I said I think Dick Cheney is a member of MJ12, the current MJ12.
Who is?
Dick Cheney.
Oh yeah, no shit. You know, there's a bunch of Raytheon employees who are in the tech realm of it on those 9/11 planes. You should look it up. It's in Computer World magazine online. 2002 was the year that article went out. Yeah. And you know, a whole bunch of potential Bush and whatever the fuck his name is, Rumsfeld, Donnie Rumsfeld connections. The guy who shot the dude in the forest. Come on now,
That is
you're
Dick
selling
Cheney.
tons of
That is
weapons to
Dick
these other
Cheney.
countries,
I like
and you,
Rumsfeld. Rumsfeld
yeah.
never
Oh,
lied.
Dick Cheney, that's right, Dick Cheney. Yeah, Dick Cheney did that. Wonderful guy.
Rumsfeld was just openly a jerk about everything. And that's what I liked about him. All these other guys pretended to be nice guys.
Yeah, he's like, I'm just a piece of shit, and I fucking want to burn the world up.
Yeah, I still remember when Bush fucking was on the news and it got announced, and he was reading that story for him. Fucking crazy, man. That. But
I think
the day before, sorry,
no, I said
the day before 9/11, there was the 240 trillion deficit that was announced, wasn't it? And then on the day, the exact records were destroyed in the Pentagon's fucking office, admin office. All the information.
Look other places. It's a coincidence. I'm kidding, of course.
Iran Contra. Charlie Wilson's war, maybe a little bit of that, you know. We could get big old boners and talk about this a little bit more, but we could also go back to UFOs. Yeah, I think it's all connected, right? But nobody knows how. It seems like there was back engineered technology that some people got it. The funding is what's really interesting to me, right? And I know Richard Dolan's really into that aspect of it, of like the black operations and funding for things, and how the funding wasn't always necessarily procured in the
cleanest of ways, but it was cleaned. And I think that's very interesting is how much funding uh, was put into these programs, where it came from. And Arthur, you kind of brought that up. So that's always been interesting to me as well, because I think if you follow that, if you follow the patents, you follow the money, then you'll have disclosure essentially, right? Because it's not about the government, it's about corporations and companies and patents and technologies. And, you know, our country isn't ran by the government anymore, it's ran by corporations. But unfortunately, most of our corporations have moved overseas. So what would that mean if most of your corporations are now in China, your major ones, who might not, you know, I'm not taking McDonald's, but some of these other ones, a lot of them have moved overseas and even to Europe and all these other places. We don't have a lot of power anymore in regard to our technologies, I think, and that stuff. I think we pass a lot of it off to China. That's just what I logically would think, right? So then that makes you fear, okay, well, are we in control anymore? Or is China really the superpower? Which I would think they are now, and we're all in denial about that, right? So.
Well, I I think funding sources is an interesting thing to think about, and I do think patents are a big part of it. And I would suspect that they would get a cut if it's coming from a reverse engineering program. They would get a cut, a big cut, and I think a lot of that money might be coming from biotech and internet stuff. So like pharmaceutical companies, and then you're talking about tech companies too.
Well, I mean, if you want to get really dark with this, I have all these strange theories about the JonBenet Ramsey case. Because her dad, nobody talks about this. Her dad, John Ramsey, had a divestment with Lockheed. And Lockheed's lawyers descended upon Boulder when that little girl died. And that ransom note said that a foreign faction was claiming responsibility for her. And I know other people think it was the parents and all this stuff. I actually got to talk to the forensic graphologist, Lloyd Cunningham, who who looked at examined the ransom note, and he didn't believe the family did it. He thought it was somebody from outside. So there's divestment going on with Lockheed, this little girl, and it's interesting that ransom note listed John Ramsey's exact bonus amount, money amount. That's what they wanted, what John's bonus would have been. How would they have known what his bonus would have been unless they worked with him or in some capacity? He was up in Colorado. We know a lot of these projects and scientists and things were up there. So that is just one like rabbit hole that's like a very famous case that makes you wonder the atrocities that might have occurred so people could procure patents and things like that. My worry has been, what if children of people in these positions were victimized or targets in some sort of way via technology or directly, right? Because I've had strange things happen to me that I'm like, okay, is that technology or what, right? So I don't know. But that's one case that people really need to go back and look at and try to figure out why we couldn't solve that for real. It's really scary to think about when you think about it that way. Like when people say people have been killed for disclosure or for things that have to do with these programs and their family members have even been in harm's way. I want you to think about that case and the possible implications there. I don't know for sure, but I think it's very interesting.
I don't really know that case very well. I know it's famous. Is it a serial killer?
It's unsolved. A lot of people thought it was, family members who killed the little girl. She was in a pageant circuit, so that also made her a target. Unfortunately, I would never put my child in pageants like that. Personally, I think it's fucking weird. But yeah, I just always thought that the fact that her dad had a divestment going on with Lockheed and Access Graphics at the time, or right before, not long before what happened to her happened, is why did nobody want to bring that up, And then there's the Georgia connections, Marietta, which is where they also had just moved from, which is where Lockheed Dobbins is. So we're going back to all these things we need to really look at.
Well, who else do you think might be on the MJ12 council now? Like, I would definitely put like whoever's in charge of Vanguard and whoever's in charge of whatever that other second hedge fund is, BlackRock. Those people, that's where a lot of power is for sure.
I would never know. I could never know. You guys would know a lot more about any of that than I ever could. So, AKA probably knows a lot about
Is
that.
that where the Rothschilds would come in, where you have the billionaires, the Illuminati thing? Is MJ12 just Illuminati but aliens?
Well, according to that document, the MJ12 document, it seemed like it was a group of, a diverse group of, policy people, scientists, military people, that they were kind of chosen for their expertise. So I don't know if we're talking about the same group, that it might be the banking group, because they might be separate.
Or do you think it's more of like a esoteric group or something? I know that who was it? Truman at the time, was he a Freemason? It seems like something, if somebody thought this was like had spiritual implications, even if it didn't, and they're the president, they would entrust people in like a little secret society, right? Some bullshit like that. I don't know. And maybe some scientists, but I think there's probably some bullshit secret society Freemason shit going on, Just my opinion.
Skull and bones type thing for sure. It's out in the open. I mean, you're looking at what's happening with Biden. I mean, they're stabbing him in the back like Caesar in front of everyone. It's like, who's pulling the strings? Who was the one that said, let's take Biden out now? That's who I'm curious.
Take a look at which banks funded the research of C.B. Scott Jones over the years.
What banks are those?
You'll see the easy Google searches. Pretty interesting stuffs, especially the research that he was conducting at the time.
And which researcher was this? Sorry, I'm doing a diaper.
C.B. Scott Jones. You got to read about his bio. Most deaf.
You think there's anyone in the UFO community who is secretly a member of MJ12? Because you think that they would have such big egos that they'd want to, interact.
Wait, like this community?
Yeah, like the ufology community. Like, do you think there's any, like, you quote unquote celebrities who are secretly, MJ12?
No. But the closest thing to anything like that would have been Tom DeLonge, but that's only because of that one party.
What about Tim Taylor running all that stuff with the Tim Taylor? What about him?
Well, that's a different story. But I mean, that he, as far as being what they like, no one has cracked the friggin' door open on NASA yet, and their involvement in all this. That is a whole fucking can of worms that absolutely, hopefully, comes out one of these days. Because there's absolutely no reason why Tim Taylor would know or be that deeply involved in what, allegedly he has.
Yeah, the thing is about NASA is they're not actually allowed to search for alien life. It wasn't actually put down to their department. It was the technical attack. It was a different booking service anyway. But yeah, NASA. It's one of those. It's things are getting launched at the moment. X-37Bs, fucking habitats in Dragon capsules, and you don't even know they're getting launched up. You don't even see them coming out, and these are high endurance, low Earth orbit craft. They're in fleets of UAPs and UAVs sorted. The fact that we are seeing more now, but we're not seeing what they saw back in the day. Think of how many full-on source of pictures that they took back in the
Yeah,
day.
you have to think about.
We've got more.
Yep.
We've got better technology now, better cameras. Why aren't we getting exactly the same now? You know what I mean? There's a very, very big difference in comparison to what's happening now and what happened then. What's happening now is some of us are waking up. We're actually waking up to reality and life. We're not being sunk down by this brainwashing that they have done for years.
Well, okay, so let's get back. So there have been several NASA engineers and contractors that have written books and been interviewed. And some of these are great interviews, by the way. One of those books out there, it basically was released posthumously after the guy died, and he was a physicist and propulsion guy, and he basically wrote an entire book on how he believes, saucers are maneuvered and how they're powered and everything. It's a wonderful book to read and just speculate on. But yeah, so I mean, there have definitely been people that have spent time at NASA that were at least allowed to go and in the public domain and say all kinds of things.
Do you remember the name of the book?
Yeah, I just have to dig it up. I'll grab it. It is available on Amazon. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those that you can read front to back and go, holy shit, did this guy have it figured out, and how?
If you follow us, AKA, I can fucking send you all types of stuff about my uncle. You asked for it ages ago, but I can't actually send it to you.
Well, it'd be a great uncle, right?
Yeah. Well, it's like we discussed it last time, didn't I? I don't really want to discuss it on a big space. Yeah. I can digging deeper. It's all the stuff's still cosmic classified, you see, so it's very difficult to actually get hold of because he was involved in some stuff. But yeah, messages, man. I can send it to you and you can have a scan at it.
I think Henry Kissinger may have been a member of MJ12. Just based on how much power he had, even till he was almost dead. Like apparently he was holding high level meetings, like even in the months before he died, with like diplomats internationally, and so that tracks with someone with a lifetime membership.
Kissinger was definitely.
I agree. I think so.
Definitely in the mix, most definitely.
My dad would always tell me stories about Kissinger. He's like obsessed with him and read tons of biographies. And he said there was this one time, I don't know the exact event, but that Nixon was so wasted that he wanted to.
They rugged her out.
Oh, is it glitching?
Power.
When people start talking about serious stuff, get kicked by the powers that be.
Oh, I see she's still here. Oh, Heather's gone. Ophelia, can you still hear us?
And you bring up Kissinger and it goes all glitchy.
Yeah, I got the book for you.
Yeah, excellent. And exactly, it gets all glitchy when you get into things.
Yep, it's called Unconventional Flying Objects.
By?
Okay, the book is by, author is, loading. God, Amazon is such a... Okay, Paul R. Hill. With the foreword written by Robert Wood and Don Dendary. But yeah, Paul R. Hill. Unconventional Flying Objects. A former NASA scientist explains how UFOs really work.
Does that have to do with Kissinger? Is Kissinger in that?
He very well could be. I mean, that was around that same time frame. So,
okay, I'll check it out. Thanks.
Yeah.
So who else? I got Cheney, Kissinger. Who else is on the 12?
Oh, now? You mean they'd have to still be alive?
Yeah, and AKA, you please respond if you think this is right. But my understanding is now under the term Zodiac. Is that correct?
I don't think anymore. I think that term's long gone as well. But what's really funny about that term is you'll never get anybody to go on record about it at all. It'll always be a no comment whenever that code name is brought up. Isn't that funny?
Well, funny, like funny in a bad way. Yeah.
Is it funny haha or funny queer?
Well, who is another? I got another name. Who is the CIA director under Obama?
Brennan.
Brennan,
would
yeah.
have been
He also owns a software company that powers Wikipedia. He's got. It could be a Brennan thing.
He's dead now, but I bet Jack Welch was involved in some way.
Who was just assigned to the board of directors at OpenAI? Which 4-star general was that?
Oh, that one out of G.I. Joe? Don't know, man.
Doctor Scalise or whatever, the guy at the head of the NRO. I've heard
No,
Alien
this is a general.
Protocol talking about him.
Yeah, this is a general.
I know. I'm coming
That
up with another. Yeah.
Oh, that's an easy Google. He just recently retired.
Okay, guys, this space has been going for quite
Oh, I
a
have
few
another
hours
name.
now.
I have another name. I'm
Hello?
trying to think of
Arthur,
the
can you
founder
hear
of
me?
Google.
Can you guys hear me? Hello?
Yes.
Okay. No, I just wanted to say this space has been going for like quite a few hours and my eyeballs are like getting sore looking at the screen. We'll let it go for like another 10 minutes and I'm gonna end this.
Well, if I could ask a question, what did Jason Sands show up? And if so, was there anything that was brought forward of interest?
Actually, it was kind of funny. I was, listening to people talking about different things, and I was scrolling through the listeners, and I saw him down there in the corner at the very bottom, and I said, I'm seeing a Jason Sands thing here. I didn't know if it was a sock or somebody trying to be him, and AKA confirmed that it was him. He came up. He was just listening at first, and he decided that he had no problem answering a few questions, and it was quite interesting. There's people in here that could tell you, some of the topics of conversation with him. It was really cool.
I would love to know what was said.
I asked him about the telepathy with this alien and just to slow step it. I don't know if he talked about it in spaces before, but it was very interesting how that worked, according to him.
Wait, Zim, you have to describe that. The buffering aspect.
Tell us more, please.
Well, he was saying that he was talking. I'm going to call it a guy. Okay, it was talking to, and then I said it. It was talking to him in like a foreign language, and he had said before it sounded almost like Swedish or something. But ahead of the speech pattern, and he said he still heard it as audible. He was getting the impression of it ahead of it. Like at first, he's thinking it's his own thoughts, and he's catching himself because the impressions of his coworkers are very foreign to what he usually thinks of them. But it's like his own thoughts, and then he's catching, as it's speaking audibly, that the relationship, that it's a little ahead of what he's saying audibly. He's getting the meaning. Isn't that wild?
Did he say anything about the 40 supposed whistleblowers that have firsthand experience?
He said that he believes they do, that Grush knows more than he does, that he believes they did have at least some of them had firsthand experience. He did say that, I think, right? Am I wrong, Arden?
Yeah, I agree. Sorry, my dog needs to go out. I'm trying to listen to you. Sorry.
I think it's a kind of a myth that's being propagated. These are 40 whistleblowers. I think Grush never said that. He said he interviewed 40 people. So these would be witnesses, some of whom would be whistleblowers, some of whom would be just, government officials. Not all of them would have firsthand experience.
Well, according to Sheehan's latest post, there's supposedly 40, firsthand sources.
Well, yeah, it
And it's all
could be
under
true.
that wing of the new whistleblower laws. Otherwise, we wouldn't hear any of this. Any of it would not have come out.
Supposedly, they've actually given testimony directly to congressional members, too. I don't know if that's true, but that's what I understand.
Eric Schmidt, that was the name I was trying to think of. Eric Schmidt, the CEO of Google. I think he's MJ12.
That's a good possibility.
Wasn't there a family type that one, like the sister owned YouTube or something, and Google was in the same family?
There's a retired military person, and I see his face, and I can't remember his name. God, who is it? I think he definitely is probably a member. God, I'll think of it.
Guys, one sec.
Do you not think?
What do you make of the fact that none of these 40 went to Aro? To me, that implies that there was a plan with David, with these 40 people, and that it was from the outset, at least the cooperative witnesses, not the hostile ones. There must have been some sort of plan, right? Because none of them went to Aro.
I think that David Grush was harassed by Aro, and in his mind were suspected, and that some of these retaliations were coming from. I think that's kind of pretty obvious.
So I'm going to reset.
But I think it's that. I think it's that Grush and his people know how it works, and they were making it clear that they didn't trust. They didn't trust what was being presented as Aro. I didn't trust it either, and I'm a nobody. 2 years ago, just watching the way they presented, I just one time Kirkpatrick in the first interview he did to publicly to a senator, he said, "Well, that's he used somebody else's problem. It was he used like the initials to it, and he just was kicked back, and he had this arrogance buzzing off of him." And I said, "Nah, not this dude. Nope."
Nobody trusts him, as in nobody.
Well, that's not nobody. Gillibrand was definitely his biggest supporter, so he had backing. He represents a faction, or he's a figurehead of some sort of faction. And I guess there's might be some internal governmental struggle, because you had the UAP task force, and then what happened with that group? Why did it get shut down and replaced or taken over by this other faction?
Well,
so
you know the answer to that. The government
Hey,
is.
you guys continue on. I'm going to take my dog out. It's all good. Carry on. I'll keep the space going.
You might want to make Larry
Oh,
co-host.
doggy. Okay, thank you.
Oh, no, it's okay. Everything's running good so far. I'll be back in a few minutes. Carry on.
Rock
Awesome.
on.
Okay, love you, Arden. We'll keep that in mind and enjoy your walk with your cute doggo.
But who are these two groups that seem to be competing? Because Kirkpatrick is just the figurehead of a larger group,
Well,
right?
there's a group that wants to keep things under wraps. That does
Maybe
not want
like
to
something
disclose.
that's more like military industrial complex versus like space, like NASA kind of thing. Maybe there's a division between those two.
I think it's good. I like where you're going, Ophelia, and I think trying to remember the Solace, like the research, UFO research. He talks about it's the intelligence community versus the military. Like there's a competition happening between basically the CIA and the DoD. So that might be what we're seeing.
There's always been turf warfare over who's going to
Could be. I think
control.
Tim Taylor does have a lot of connections to NASA, though, doesn't he? And a lot of these people have these other patents. So if there's people with patents who had military connections, and there's people who have patents who have NASA kind of shit going on, and the people who have the NASA connections seem to be doing a lot of more of the positive biomedical, tech and things like that. Maybe that's a clue. I don't know.
Well, you don't join NASA to kill people, and you go to NASA if you don't want to go to the military. So it kind of self-selects for a certain type of person.
Exactly. And I think yeah, maybe that's where the division is, right? And unfortunately, like the space program had some weird beginnings, right? And we all know about the Scientology and occult Parsons and Hubbard and all that weird shit. But I think it eventually kind of cleaned itself up personally. If you watch most of the NASA rocket launches and stuff like that, they have like ministers that pray with the astronauts, and they're praying constantly with ministers. So I don't think there's anything like nefarious in terms of the occult going on there. But we do know Michael Aquino, who is the head of the psychological warfare department, colonel, or wasn't he colonel? Was he a colonel? Yeah, he was the head of the Temple of Set, which was basically the post to the Temple of Satan. So I don't know, maybe that has something to do with it, that our psychological warfare operations expert who coined the term psyop was the head of the church or the Temple of Set. And then people at NASA have ministers praying for the astronauts. I don't know. I think that's kind of interesting. Don't you?
So do you think these are actually ET groups, like pulling the strings of human groups, like that you say that it's connected to Set? Do you think Set is an actual extraterrestrial who may be communicating with his followers or something?
I think they're pan-dimensional. I don't think they're necessarily extraterrestrial.